Hello, fellow Gnostic sex cultists. Welcome to Happy Hour. Happy Hour is a little stream that we do on Fridays where we do basically what we do every day on this channel, which is we watch a woke training and we talk about it. But Happy Hour is very exciting because we have beer. If you're drinking something fun, please let us know what you're drinking in the chat. Per our Happy Hour tradition, in a little bit, I will be telling you about the collection of 4 beers that I have sitting here, and you guys get to vote on which one I drink first. But first, I want to tell you what exactly we are watching for Happy Hour today, and I'm very, very excited because our hero, Stu Studio. Stu is here. And Stu, I got to give it to you for this one, bro. I don't know when you recorded this. And Stu, I'm sure you'll be able to tell us more information about when you recorded this. But Stu outdid himself with this one. Because on April 1st, on Stu, and you guys know we've been watching Stu's content a little bit here and there because Stu is actually one of those like rare breed of people where he's just going out and doing good journalism and he's getting all these recordings from colleges and he's FOIAing information. And right now, Stu is doing just a phenomenal job. Like, I mean, just really top notch of tracking all the different college protests all over the country. I highly recommend that you guys follow Stu on Twitter. He is at the Stu Studio. You know, Stu and I might not agree on everything, but like I don't even care because Stu is doing such good work and such good journalism, and I think that we can be cordial despite any disagreements we might have about Israel and those sorts of things. I hope anyway, because I just think he's doing really good work, and I think that it's something that I'm really happy to get the chance to highlight on the channel and stuff like that. But Stu on his YouTube channel, which you should also follow, on April 1st, he uploaded this training to his channel called Resistance 101, hosted by Columbia University Apartheid Divest. Columbia University Apartheid Divest is the group at Columbia that is behind the organization of the protest. And it's not just one group, by the way. It's actually a coalition of like 100 different campus groups that have all come together under this Columbia University Apartheid Divest thing. And they're the ones that have been actually organizing protests about this for months and months and months and months and months. And before the big one broke out, Stu uploaded this to his YouTube channel. Resistance 101 was hosted by Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which features speakers from Within Our Lifetime. Within Our Lifetime is one of the groups that is helping to coordinate the protests. And the National Students for Justice in Palestine. That's the other group that is really like behind coordinating nationally. And no, this is not funded by George Soros. Oh my God. Conservatives are now insufferable with this George Soros bullshit. And I'm not going to say too much about this because if I start ranting about the George Soros conspiracy theory, I'm literally going to be ranting about it for like hours because there is so much shitty journalism being put out today claiming to have discovered this George Soros connection that doesn't even track back to the groups that are actually organizing the protests. And it's like people just look at the headline. They don't look at any of the details. They don't know the details. They don't know the groups that are actually organizing the protests. And they just run around going, Soros! And it's just like, you are all retarded. Honestly and truly, you are all retarded. And if you actually just spend like more than 2 minutes like looking at the facts, it doesn't add up at all. But it doesn't matter because all conservatives want to do is rant about George Soros, George Soros. It's like, oh my God. But we're not going to rant about that right now. You want to know why? Because we've got a really cool training we're going to watch today. This is the training that was done before the big protests broke out. And we have Stu Studio to thank for this. So we're really happy about that. I'm thrilled to be able to watch this training today. This will actually give us insight into what was being taught at Columbia, right? But like to the groups that organized the protest. So I think this is going to be great. We're going to spend some time on that. Now, I do have a couple other things to go over before we get started. Number one, please make sure you subscribe to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. This is actually my main content hub of the internet. You can subscribe for free, get free email updates. I posted last night. A lot of people are confused about why the college protesters are wearing masks. And there is actually logic behind this. And it's not what you think. And I know that because as soon as I posted this article, I had a bunch of conservatives responding to me going, it's to hide their identity. No, it's not. I understand why you think that, but that's not what it is. So go look at the receipts in this article. I explain explicitly with evidence from actually in this article, I feature the Substack of Columbia University Apartheid Divest because Columbia University Apartheid Divest was coordinating all of this via their Substack before the big protest broke out. So you can find out more about why they're all wearing masks over on the Substack. You can also get an update from a couple things that happened yesterday. So the University of Southern California yesterday canceled their main stage graduation because the valedictorian that was scheduled to speak at it made some anti-Israel posts on social media, and so they took away her ability to speak, and then there were these clashes with the cops, so they canceled their main stage graduation. We also learned that Harvard University, Northeastern University, basically like the Boston area schools, are coordinating with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is one of the groups that I've been tracking for months and months and months and months and months, and that all came out yesterday. And just in case you missed it, the sprinkler incident. The sprinkler incident at Harvard. The sprinklers almost thwarted the Harvard encampment, but they regrouped. They got it together. And actually today at Arizona State University, they purposefully turned on the sprinklers at Arizona State University as well, but that didn't actually work. In fact, the cops came and tried to tear down the encampment. And then after the cops came and tore down the encampment, the Arizona State students just put it right back up. But yeah, the great sprinkler incident of 2024 at Harvard will never not be funny. So that's this type of stuff you're going to find on my Substack, guys. And if you do want to support the work I'm doing, I hope you'll consider signing up for $8 a month and $80 a year. One of the things that you're going to get when you sign up for my Substack is access to my supporter Discord, where we do movie nights every single Sunday night. As a reminder, movie night starts at 6 p.m. this week. We usually start movie night at 8 p.m. This week it's starting at 6 p.m. because we are doing a Hunger Games double feature. We are watching part 1 and part 2 of the Hunger Games. And so those are long-ass movies. And I don't know why we decided this was a good idea, but for some reason we did decide this was a good idea. And so we are starting at 6 p.m. for movie nights. And no, this is not why. No, that's not correct either, bro. You got to go over to like conservatives. I need you to hinge yourself back into reality. Conservatives are really starting to descend into just like conspiracy theory lunacy. Like they've always been conspiracy theorists, but it's getting really bad now. And that's, they're the ones that are going to lose because of it. So, whatever. Anyway, movie night, 6 p.m. We're watching Hunger Games double feature. Just remember that. Like, you don't want to show up at 8 p.m. and be like, why did I miss 2 hours of movie night? Because you didn't show up at 6 p.m. All right. That's one of the bonuses that you get when you sign up as a supporter on my Substack. You're also going to be able to access, and I haven't posted clips from this yet. We did a queer liberation training day 1 and day 2 through the California Community College system this week. If you want to see the full recordings of the queer liberation, like live trainings that we infiltrated this week over the course of 2 days, you can find that on my Substack. That's for supporters only. $8 a month, $80 a year keeps me in business, guys. I'm completely 100% funded by you, and I do appreciate it. Now, before we do the beer, you guessed it. We have another James Lindsay update because James Lindsay, for some reason, he is completely incapable of actually intellectually engaging with any of the arguments that I'm making. Instead, James's head injury is acting up and he's descending into the land of retardia on Twitter. And he just keeps tweeting about me. And for some reason, instead of actually engaging with the intellectual criticisms that I'm doing of his work, which are very, very clear, queer theory is not a Gnostic sex cult. Queer theory is an attack on capitalism via trying to abolish the gender binary because they believe that capitalism created the gender binary, put men in the workplace, women in the home, doing the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers. Queer theory is also an attack on the nuclear family because they believe the nuclear family via social reproduction theory is the literal production mechanism of capitalism. This is all documented. I have like hundreds of clips at this point that says that specifically. That is what the left believes. The left is not a Gnostic sex cult. James has descended into lunacy by writing an entire book calling queer theory a Gnostic sex cult when it is not. And we're doing the hard work of pointing this out to James and his followers because I would actually like people to be prepared for what they're up against. And James is not doing that. James is like the Pied Piper, leading them right off the goddamn cliff. So James doesn't like this. And James keeps elevating troll accounts. So James saw fit yesterday to tweet this troll account about me. They only had 7 followers at the time. Now, even this troll account has gotten tens of thousands of views because of James Lindsay. And people are so interested in what this troll account has to say that it went from 7 followers to 15 followers. Well done, James. Well done. I mean, I just don't know how you're doing it, bro. I don't, all that promotion of this troll account and they only have 15 followers. I mean, really, that's definitely a credible source of information, James. But so we saw this yesterday as I was ending the stream. I did a video on it. If you guys want to see because I saw this live on a stream yesterday, someone came into my chat and was like, James Lindsay posted a video about you. And literally it was right as I was ending the stream. So I posted a clip of that today. And basically the reaction is James is having a meltdown. This is unhinged. But then James posted about me again today. Now, for those of you who are keeping track, this is now 2 weeks of James Lindsay just posting troll content about me. James Lindsay has said on more than one occasion now that I have borderline personality disorder, which I provably do not have. So James, that's kind of defamation, bro. And if you want to keep insinuating that I have a personality disorder that I don't have out to your 500,000 followers on Twitter, if I experience any negative repercussions for you lying to 500,000 people based on a medical diagnosis that you are not qualified to make, then we'll just see what happens, bro. But for right now, James Lindsay has more than once said that I have borderline personality disorder out to his audience. He has said that I am part of a Gnostic sex cult because I understand the law of attraction and A Course in Miracles. He posted a photoshopped image to make it look like no one is watching my live streams. He literally photoshopped it to say it had 1 view when it provably had over 1,000, at that time. And he just keeps going with this. And today he's posting Poetry Painter. And Poetry Painter has been stalking me literally for 4 years. And just as a reminder, this is Poetry Painter. This is what she looks like. This is her public. Oh, it looks like Jill has finally figured out. Has she finally figured out how to depublicize her photos? She has. Oh, Jill, you finally figured out how to make your photos private, Jill. Well, we still have these photos. This is the woman that James Lindsay is retweeting. She obviously never leaves her house because she spends all day, every day tweeting about me. And by the way, we're pretty sure that Jill is actually the person behind this account as well. And this account is making all sorts of videos about me. So we think it's the same person, but this is basically this crazy lunatic believes it is her mission to warn the world that I'm a horrible person, and she takes these screenshots out of context and she makes these crazy old lady memes. This is Jill Fugman's version of a meme. This is James Lindsay's fandom version of a meme. It's taking my tweets out of context and then twisting them with all caps to make them seem like I am a horrible, evil groomer and a member of a Gnostic sex cult, all because I dare question that James Lindsay says queer theory is a Gnostic sex cult, because obviously queer theory is not a Gnostic sex cult. It is an attack on capitalism via the gender binary and the nuclear family. But no, this is the answer that James Lindsay is giving to those criticisms. So he tweeted that today. I mean, I just don't know how I can compete with such intellectual greatness. That is what James Lindsay is offering us right now. Remember, he is a literal doctor, guys. James Lindsay. Oh, wait, I'm a literal doctor too. And actually, as it turns out, James, my doctorate is actually much more relevant to what is actually going on in the world, because I'm a doctor of psychology, specifically in industrial organizational psychology, which means I know how to analyze the psychology of group systems. You're a mathematician, James. We'll set that aside for now. But you know what James is really upset about? Do you know what James is actually really upset about? Let me show you. Who here remembers the revolutionary communists of America? Does anyone here in my audience know who the revolutionary communists of America are? Because this past week, for Socialism Saturday, I had a talk with two real live communists. And as it turns out, those communists that I literally had on my channel on Saturday were two of the leaders in the new Revolutionary Communists of America political party. And if we just scroll back just a little while, I actually spent a really long time. You can see here, I spent days, literally days, covering the Revolutionary Communists of America. This is back in. Let's see if it shows me the date. I don't know if it'll show me the date if I hover over it. This was back at the end of February, basically. Meet the new Communist Party, meet the new Revolutionary Communist Party, meet the new Revolutionary. Like we did several days worth of this. Even on Socialism Saturday, we even looked at the Canadian version of the Revolutionary Communists of America, because not only do the Revolutionary Communists of America exist in America, they also exist in Canada, the UK, Switzerland, Sweden, all sorts of countries. Reagan fact check, it was February 26th that I started covering the Revolutionary Communists of America. Now, I thought it was funny that yesterday, after I had been covering the Revolutionary Communists of America for literally months, James, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, discovers that the Revolutionary Communists of America are a thing. Well, I shouldn't say that. James knew about this at exactly the same time I knew about it. But he didn't take it seriously at the time, and I'm going to prove that. So yesterday, James posted the screenshot from the video for the Revolutionary Communists of America. Now, this is literally the same video that we watched and analyzed on February 26th. Okay? So I posted, "Let's all welcome James Lindsay to the party. He finally discovered the Revolutionary Communists America," which I started covering months ago. I even interviewed two of their members on my channel last Saturday. Better late than never, James. And then Reagan, shout out to Reagan. Reagan is the best. Reagan is like our fact checker extraordinaire. Reagan says, "This is true. On February 26th, James Lindsay was joking and called the new party the RevComs. The RevComs are not the same thing as the Revolutionary Communists of America. He did not take them seriously." Also on February 26th, Carlin did a deep dive into the very organized new Communist Party to inform us, and later infiltrated a recruiting call. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We literally infiltrated one of their recruiting calls. I have that on my Substack. We literally infiltrated one of their recruiting calls. Hang on. Where was it? Where was it? It wasn't that long ago. We literally went undercover in one of their recruiting calls. And let me just show you Reagan's receipts. So on February 26th, when the Revolutionary Communists of America launched, here was James's response. "The RevComs aren't new and are a weird splinter, but nonetheless, the RevComs are a completely different group. The Revolutionary Communists of America have nothing to do with the RevComs. The point I'm making is this, that maybe James Lindsay is promoting troll accounts on Twitter because to discredit my work, because he doesn't want people watching my work. Because if they watched my work, they would find out that I've been covering things that James Lindsay laughed off, that he didn't even bother to look into. I started covering this stuff months ago. I started showing people what this was months ago, before James even took it seriously. James dismissed this out of hand. James told, I promise you, James told Z Van Fleet to dismiss this. I know, because of a DM conversation I had with Z Van Fleet, where Z Van Fleet was said, "Carlin, don't worry, that's not something we need to worry about." And I said, "Z, that's not correct." But Z Van Fleet is in James Lindsay's back pocket, and I am positive that came from James. Because James hadn't bothered to look into it and didn't even know what it was. But my audience already knew because I'd been covering this shit from the very beginning on February 26th. So I'm sure that James is feeling just a little awkward about the fact that, listen, James Lindsay was the top dog for a long, long time. We can all acknowledge that. There was a time when I was behind James. But that time has fucking passed. And now, provably, based on James's own actions, I would argue that I'm years ahead of James, but in this case, I am minimally months ahead of James. My audience will know what's going on months before James Lindsay even gets around to looking for it. So James can continue to cry his tears all he wants, but I'm going to give James something to cry about. I'll tell you what. Because I've been hemming and hawing about whether or not I'm going to go to AFPAC, mostly because I had a scheduling conflict and there's some other stuff going on. And so I was like, I don't know if I can make it work. But I know that James Lindsay hates the Groypers more than almost any other group. I know that Michael O'Fallon, who is the guy who writes the fat checks to James Lindsay for new discourses, he hates the Groypers more than almost any other group on the internet. So you know what? James Lindsay wants to cry on the internet about me almost every single day of his life while doing nothing productive to inform the public, because James Lindsay's just retweeting conspiracy theory nonsense and saying, don't hire college graduates right now. He's not actually informing the public of what's happening. If James Lindsay wants something to cry about, I will give you something to cry about, mother effer. I'm going to AFPAC. James, you can eat a dick. My work is far superior to yours. You know my work is far superior to yours. And for everyone else who might question it, I would recommend you head over to my Twitter, which is it's Dr. Carlin B on Twitter or X. And right at the top, you can even see a testimonial from someone else who believes that my work is far superior to James. I watched James a long time ago, but what he was teaching didn't make any sense in what we were actually seeing inside schools. Your work has always been clear with direct connections to the actual people who are influential in the socialist march forward. James is leading people down a hellhole of lies, and he is going to defend it to the detriment of all the families and children who depend on knowing the truth. Thank you, Carlin. Hopefully more people will soon start to see the truth you are shining a bright light on. Eat a dick, James. Crying isn't going to make your work better than mine, James. Crying is not an intellectual argument, James. My audience knows more about what's going on the left than your audience can ever dare dream, as they're seething and coping on Twitter all day long because they're not smart enough to follow my content, James. That's all. Let's talk about beer, shall we? I have 4 beers today for happy hour that I'm going to give you guys a chance to vote on. The first beer is queer. I bought a queer beer at the beer store, and this is actually a Pride Month beer. I couldn't help myself. It's called Black Currant, and it says, hang on. Bursting with black currant, party in your mouth is a joyous expression of flavor and love. This refreshingly tart sour ale is brewed in recognition of Pride Month and beyond, in celebration of the wonderful humans that make this beautiful place to live. But nevertheless, something pride. That is our queer beer. It is Party Mouth. It is a black currant beer. Our next beer on the list for today that you guys get to vote on before we get into the presentation is... I got it because of the can. The can is so beautiful. You know, a woman designed this can. This can is so beautiful. Look at that. And this is called Endless Ride Kettle Sour Ale. This is blueberry and lemon zest. And that's all it says. So we've got our blueberry lemon beer, which is an excellent combination. I just knocked over a beer. Our next beer. Who loves Elvis? Going to Graceland is one of the coolest trips you'll ever make. Even if you don't like Elvis, going to Graceland is still cool. This is an Elvis-inspired beer. It is called Hunka Hunka, and it is a chocolate, peanut butter, and banana imperial stout. It is a 9% alcohol beer, and it has Elvis on the can. Love that. And our last option for today is from my favorite brewery, Southern Tier. It is an orange and vanilla ice cream twist beer. It is also an imperial, almost 9%, So these are our heavy hitters, the Elvis and the Orange Twist. And then we've got the queer beer with Party Mouth. We've got the blueberry zest beer that's there. You guys can go ahead and vote in the chat on YouTube which one you would like me to drink, and I'll say hello to the folks over on Rumble as well. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to pull this presentation up, and we're going to get ready to get started. I got to put my sunglasses back on. That's better. Now I can actually see again. There we go. There we go. Guys, please make sure you mount the like button for me if you have not already. We do happy hour every single Friday at 5 p.m. And it looks like Elvis is far and away the winner for right now. All right, we'll do the Elvis beer. All right, all right, all right. All right. I wanted the Orange Twist one, but that's all right. I can be outvoted for right now. All right, let's see. Let's get this party started, guys. We are watching, thanks to Stu Studio, this training called Resistance 101 that was hosted at Columbia University prior to the start of the protest. Let's
quote unquote. Hi everyone, thank you all for coming to this Resistance 101 event. As you can tell, we're all in a different room than we were originally supposed to be in. And the reason why is because there was a PhD student who made a complaint towards the committee investigation and the NYPD that this event was an event that sponsored or was a terrorist event, quote unquote. So the Barnard Center for Research on Women had to cancel on us last minute because they were concerned.
Oh, wow, they canceled their event.
Yeah,
oh, shit.
This is part of Columbia's long line of repression.
Hang on. I apologize. I have like 5 super chats that came in. My bad. Sorry, guys. Naruto says, I wonder what the good conservative Christian Candace Owens thinks of her BFF Kanye West starting a porn production company. Yeah, that's crazy that Kanye West, like the Groypers are all turning on Kanye West at this point. It's gross. Porn is gross, guys. Don't watch porn. Just go find someone to have sex with, or go get some nice toys and have sex yourself. It's so much more fun than porn. Porn is so awful. It's so gross. Just be better. Come on. Naruto, we found out today from the New York Post that showers are performative with no health benefit. Yeah, I saw that too. The New York Post also reported that George Soros is behind the Columbia protests, so I think we can kind of discount anything they say from now on. Milo, the cons desperately want to believe Soros funded because they can't handle the truth that there are probably more dedicated and motivated young Marxists in the US than conservatives. Milo, that is a really, really, really good point. The conservatives make every excuse in the book because they're desperate to believe that they're really the silent majority when in fact they are not. If they were the silent majority, they would actually be able to win elections. And then Rottweiler, imagine sucking at trolling, grab a few trolls from his BoomerCon fans, and they also suck at it. James better ask for a refund if he paid them. Yo, I mean, I think if there's one thing I hope that we can all agree on, it's that my audience is way better at memeing and trolling than James's audience can ever dare dream. All right. I apologize for missing those super chats. We're really watching the presentation now.
We're kind of used to at this point, but it's kind of ironic following the fact that there was a raging Islamophobe who was literally here a few days ago. But yeah, just had to explain that clarification to everyone because, you know, I don't know if everyone had the explanation as to why we had changed rooms. But jumping into our event today, it's going to be a 1-hour panel discussion with our speakers. And then it's going to be followed by a 30-minute Q&A. Is the QR code up?
Oh, God, this smells like banana. No. I can smell the banana
so we'll put the QR code up in a minute. But basically, if you guys want to scan the QR code, you guys can submit questions throughout, and then we'll be basically announcing the questions at the end during our 30-minute Q&A session. Before we start with introducing our panel speakers, Kayla's just going to go over some safety tips for this event.
All right, we'll just go through some safety guidelines. So here we have, in this room we have our safety marshals. You guys should raise your hands.
Safety marshals.
So if you need basically anything during this event, please approach one of the safety marshals. There's some on this side, some on that side as well. Any recording or photographing during this event is prohibited. And if we do find you doing that, you'll be escorted out by the other marshals. But
Stu, how did you get this recording?
There we go. Yeah. And so now I'd like to, or Sarah will introduce the panel.
So our panelists today, we have 3 of our panelists here too on Zoom. Our first panelist speaker is Nadine Kiswani. Nadine Kiswani is...
But were you actually there live? Did you infiltrate their recording and you just ignored their no recording rules? Stu is such a rebel. I love this guy. I love it. Yeah, it's a trade secret. Don't say it live on the internet, Stu. It's okay. We don't want you to give away your trade craft.
Yeah. Is the chair of Within Our Lifetime and co-founder of CUNY for Palestine. Our second panelist is Charlotte Cates, who is on Zoom. Charlotte Cates
I agree.
is the international coordinator of the Sami Doun Palestinian Prisoners Network. Our third panelist is Khaled Barakat, who is a Palestinian writer.
Does that QR code still work?
Writer and member of the executive committee of Masr Baden, the Palestinian Alternative Revolutionary Path Movement. And then our fourth panelist is Michael, who's a local organizer with Sami Doun Palestinian Prisoners Network in New York, New Jersey. And then our last panelist is Sean Aaron. Sorry, member of the National Students for Justice in Palestine Steering Committee and lead editor of The Written Resistance. Everyone, welcome.
Right, so very quickly on the screen is the QR code. You can scan that and take you to a website where you can ask questions. So if you have questions for the later part of the segment, please scan it now. Really good.
Oh, yo!
Right, so
It looks like Crowder got inside a Columbia encampment meeting. That's awesome. Okay, I kind of poo-poo on Crowder's undercover journalism stuff sometimes because it's usually not very good. But that's legit, man. I just retweeted that for people who want to see.
First, again, we'll start with questions that were prepared for the panel. And so first question is, just to provide some context for our audience members, can you guys tell us what Palestinians are resisting against and what Palestinians are fighting for?
I guess I can start us off. For almost a century at this point, Palestinians have been resisting violent settler colonialism, Zionism, which is the plan to colonize Palestine, to encourage migration from Europe, to literally take over Palestinian land by any means necessary, which was killing the indigenous population, expelling the indigenous population. We know that Zionism.
As a reminder, and actually this is good because I think we've had some new people watching lately, so we're going to do some kind of I want to do some review. So for people who've been around for a while, please forgive me. Pop quiz for the chat. What does colonization mean? When they call Israel the settler colonists, or they say colonialization, which is basically the same thing, what does that actually mean when we are speaking in the language of socialist? Because it might not be straightforward to people who don't know how to speak socialist yet, so we need to work to bring everyone along. When they're saying colonization, settler colonist, it means imposing capitalism, little bit more. Colonization means taking a piece of land that belonged to indigenous people. When land belongs to indigenous people, it inherently belongs to the collective. It's not owned by anyone. Colonization means taking that land that belongs to the indigenous people and privatizing it under the oppressive force of capitalism, which means private property ownership. Colonists are the ones bringing capitalism to the region. Exactly. They're bringing capitalism to the land, taking over the land from the indigenous population and using it and imposing capitalism on it. By the way, everyday therapist, there was something going on in Pittsburgh last night. There was the encampment, I think, is getting bigger there. Privatization of land from the oppressive force of capitalism. Exactly. Israel, the reason that the students are so anti-Israel is not because they're Jewish. They actually really don't care about that. In fact, there are Jewish students that are involved in the organizing of these protests. They had Shabbat dinner at the encampment like the other night. And so I want people to really understand this. This is not about anti-Semitism, although I understand why people can think that. The reason they are against Israel is because they perceive Israel to be the capitalist oppressor. It could be any other group that isn't Jewish, and they would say the same thing. It just happens to be that in this case, they're Jewish, and so that's just the way it goes. Colonization means stealing and privatizing land from indigenous people to enable capitalist oppression, because the number one enemy of the left is capitalism. Imposing capitalism on the land and people. Exactly. Lots of good answers in the chat. I'm not going to take the time to show everyone, but that is what it means. Oh, that's what I was remembering. Cornell West spoke at Pittsburgh yesterday. That's what I was I knew something happened. Thank you, Stu.
Was introduced by Theodore Herzl, and it was introduced decades before 1948, which marks the Nakba, which marks when 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from their homelands, at least 531 villages depopulated. But, leading up to this, it took time, to actually make this happen. Palestinians resisted settler colonialism when we lived under British settler colonialism. We resisted it under the Ottoman Empire. We will resist.
See, British settler colonialism. They didn't view, like, they treated Britain, when Britain was like the empire, they treated Britain the same way as they're treating Israel now, because it doesn't have to do with being Jewish. It has to do with privatizing the land.
Zionist settler colonialism and any iterations of it to come. We believe that Palestine has the right to be free, and that doesn't just mean a two-state solution. It means
the right to be free means free from the oppressive force of capitalism.
Every single inch of Palestine, from the river to the sea. When we talk about Palestinian refugees, we understand that a majority of Palestinians actually at this point, or I don't know if the majority, but more Palestinians live outside of Palestine than in Palestine at this point. Sorry, I can hear my echo, so it's like disorienting. Where was I at?
You're saying more Palestinians.
Oh yeah. So when we talk about Palestinian freedom and we exclude the Palestinian right to return, to their original homes and towns and villages, then you're not talking about Palestinian freedom. It's not just Gaza and the West Bank. Although we are so honored and we are so lucky to have, our people in Gaza and our people in the West Bank continuing to fight for us for a free Palestine, to put everything on the line, because without them, without, our resistance fighting, I may not be alive today. Palestine may not be alive today. There might not be something called Palestine. So this is what we're fighting for, I guess, in the simplest terms. We were kicked off of our land forcibly. Our people continue to be exploited. They continue to be killed. In Gaza, they are used as lab rats, where Israel can test weapon technologies on us, like the drones that you saw blow up those 4 Palestinians to bits in Gaza the other day. And they will export this technology, around the world. So when we fight for Palestine, we're not just fighting for Palestinian freedom and liberation from oppression. We're fighting for the freedom of all oppressed people, because whatever tactics of oppression that are developed and accepted, and
when they say that, what they're saying is, we are not free until everyone is free. You'll hear them repeating this a lot. We are not free until everyone is free. It's not just about Palestine. It's about fighting for the freedom of all people. When they're talking about liberation, that means to free oneself from the oppressive force of capitalism. They want to get rid of capitalism because they believe capitalism creates all the problems in the world. Capitalism creates all inequities in the world. They want to replace capitalism with Marxism. Another word they frequently use for that is equity. Every time you hear the word equity, that is from each according to their ability to each according to their need. That is Marxism. Capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, and equity cannot exist in the same place at the same time. But they believe that if they liberate one group from the oppressive force of capitalism, which is supporting the glorious revolution of the Palestinians in this case, that will be a step towards liberating everyone from the oppressive force of capitalism. We are not free until everyone is free. All oppressed people means everyone who lives under capitalism. We are not free until everyone is free is about how everyone is not free until everyone agrees that capitalism is the root of all evil. They want to trade the oppressive force of capitalism with the oppressive rule. Well, the oppressive, not just of the government, Tolkien fan, of the socialist government, which is different than the government we have now, because they call the government we have now the capitalist government.
Spread out, by Zionists through Palestine, they're going to export that to the rest of the world. And we see that through the police training with one another. We see that through the drone surveillance technology overhead at our protests right now that comes from Zionists in occupied Palestine, or so-called Israel. And at the end of the day, we understand that whatever they're allowed to get away with in Palestine, they're gonna bring it on to the rest of the world. Ultimately, the Palestinian liberation struggle, all the resistance factions that are fighting for that, it's ultimately a nationalist struggle, a national liberation struggle, where we believe that all of our people have the right to live in freedom, in dignity, from the river to the sea, every inch of Palestine, in their original homes, Haifa, Yafa, Akka, not just the West Bank, not just Gaza. Although they are the vanguard, and they are leading our struggle as people who ultimately face the harshest consequences of Zionist settler colonialism. Up until this summer, I was banned from even visiting Palestine. All four of my grandparents were born there. All four of them. My father was born there, and I was banned. The only reason I was able to go this summer is because the so-called State of Israel wanted access to the visa waiver program, right? And the only reason that I could even go before I was banned was because I'm an American citizen. But my mom's family, who live in Jordan, where most of the Palestinian refugees live, are not even able to visit. They've never been able to visit, even though they live just 1 hour away. And they don't even get fully recognized. They don't have citizenship in Jordan, along with what many Palestinians are experiencing in Lebanon, other neighboring Arab countries, all over the world. And they are still fighting. They're originally from Yafa. They're still fighting to return to their original.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Elena. Thank you, Elena. During COVID, the British government had the slogan, "No one is safe until everyone feels safe." It feels like, well, that's because it is linked, Elena. And this actually goes back to that article that I posted on the Substack yesterday for people who didn't see. Oh, shoot, I accidentally reloaded when I didn't mean to. That's all right. We'll get back to that in a second. Hang on. So I actually posted this article on the Substack yesterday. There we go. About why college protesters are wearing masks. And it's actually directly linked to this idea, which is that socialists believe in something, yes, bot, called collective safety or collective care. Remember, the left are collectivists. They don't believe in individualism. They believe they are all part of a collective group, and because they are all part of the collective group, it is everyone's responsibility to care for everyone else. And so if you want the too long didn't read on why college protesters are wearing masks, they actually told us on the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Substack, mask up, COVID-19 is still a risk, and we want to protect our community. And then secondarily, they said masking also allows your face to be covered. So I'm not going to say there isn't an identity protection thing with it as well. But what I will tell you is that when I went undercover at the Socialism 2023 conference, I'm not going to make you watch this video, but I want to just get to a specific part in this video. Hang on. Let me just show you this one part of this video. This is at a private event, okay? This is at a private conference. Let me just show you this part real quick. Again, this is from the Socialism 2023 conference that I went undercover at in Chicago back in September. Oh, that's not it. Hang on, I gotta fast forward a little bit more. Not there. This part.
Mask. We have a mask mandate. I'm glad y'all cheered for that.
Thank you, socialism. So there was a mask mandate at the Socialism 2023 conference. And the reason there was a mask mandate is because socialists believe in collective care. They believe that everyone has a responsibility for caring for everyone else. And the reason I show you that video is there was no reason for them to hide their identity in that conference. That was in a private space. That was a private event. They were only surrounded by other socialists. No one was taking names or doing any of that. So the only reason to have a mask mandate at a private socialist event is to make sure that you are engaging in collective care for the community. So back to Elena's super chat, no one is safe until everyone feels safe. That is very literally the socialist mindset when it comes to the masking issue. Excellent observation, Elena. I appreciate it.
Refugees live are not even able to visit. They've never been able to visit, even though they live just 1 hour away. And they don't even get fully recognized. They don't have citizenship in Jordan, along with what many Palestinians are experiencing in Lebanon, other neighboring Arab countries, all over the world. And, you know, they are still fighting. They're originally from Yafa. They're still fighting to return to their original homes and towns. They've never accepted this idea that they would be kicked out, and then they have this new identity, this new nationality. When I was banned, I was interrogated by the Israeli soldier who asked me, why do I even identify as a Palestinian? If I was born in Jordan and I live in America, then I'm American now. I'm Jordanian now. This is what they want us to accept, and we won't accept that. We assert our nationhood. We assert that we are still one people, even if they try to spread us apart, even if they want to make, the so-called two-state solution non-contiguous, having Gaza completely isolated from the West Bank, having us scattered throughout refugee camps and across the world. They want us to be liquidated into whatever places that we ended up in, and we refuse this. We assert that we are one people, one nation. We have the right to return home, and we will get that right by any means necessary.
Do any of the other panelists want to answer this question here on Zoom?
I would just say a few words. I mean, I agree with everything Nardine said, and she said it so eloquently. But I just want to thank you for inviting us and to be part of this panel.
Hang on. CM says if they want to hide their identity, doesn't that mean they're ashamed? No. It means they don't want to be expelled. It means they don't want to be have the cops show up at their door. It's just I'm sorry, it's a smart thing to do. And to be honest, Columbia University has actually kind of proven them right about that. So no, they're not ashamed of what they believe at all. They just don't want to like getting arrested or getting expelled gets in the way of them executing on what they want to execute. It's not about consequences. Listen, I'm sorry. It would have been a really effing smart thing for people on January 6th to wear goddamn masks. It's not about consequences. It's about getting arrested is inconvenient. Getting expelled is inconvenient. Every single one of you, don't fucking act like you're all high and mighty, Gray One. Every single one of you, if you had an option between wearing a mask and getting arrested or wearing a mask and getting expelled or some sort of negative consequence, you would wear the mask. Don't pretend otherwise. You're an anonymous account on the internet. And until you start using your real name, don't talk about other people being afraid of consequences. You are an anonymous account on the internet. The faculty are not the ones who decide who is and is not expelled.
And at the same time, I know that students in the US have been harassed by these Zionists. And as we speak.
Cool. Go by your real name and put your real photo. You could be making that up right now. We have no idea. I could make an anonymous account on the internet and say, my name is Johnny Jones, and that's why you have to take everything I'm saying seriously. Because I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Go by your real name, use your photo, or don't talk about other people being afraid of consequences.
right now, tens of thousands of Palestinians and Jordanians are marching towards the
Yup,
Zionist
you could.
embassy.
You could. You absolutely could. You could be an absolute coward like you're already being and use a fake photo and a fake name. But that actually, listen, bro, listen. You're one of those people in my chat that just continues to not get it. You're one of those like conservatives that just clings on to your bullshit above all else. We're not doing it anymore. We are not fucking owning the libs just to make you behind your anonymous account that you're probably running from your mom's fucking basement feel better about not having any life outside the goddamn internet. Anyway.
In Jordan, and they've been blocked by the Jordanian army and police. But, our people are also besieging their Zionist institutions and embassies. So it's the struggle continues. They cannot just harass us. I wanted to say that to understand the Palestinian struggle and resistance is very important.
I always thought it was ironic that you held pro-Palestinian. I don't hold Okay, so first of all, I don't hold pro-Palestinian sentiments. That's just false. Stop lying. Stop making shit up. I am not pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel. I am anti-war and anti-genocide. That is my position that I have repeated over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I've always thought it was ironic that you were anti-genocide and anti-war while opposing queer Marxists. Well, if you understood the Marxists, you wouldn't think that. College students, which are the very same people opposing Israel, you sound like a literal revolutionary socialist. You sound like a literal retard. If you're honestly coming in here and saying that because I'm anti-war and anti-genocide, I'm a revolutionary socialist, that literally probably makes you the stupidest person in my chat. You claim to be I don't claim to be in the middle. Again, conservatives, this is why you lose. This is why you lose over and over and over and over and over again. I don't claim to be in the middle. I also don't make anti-Semitic comments. I don't care if people are Jewish. So keep making shit up. While you're doing that, I'm going to go over to Twitter and block you.
Important to put it in context as an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial struggle. It's not just a conflict between Palestinians and Israeli settlers or Zionists. It's
all the time.
More than that. The very first attempt to colonize Palestine was at the hands of the French in 1800s when Napoleon paid a visit to Palestine with his army, and he was defeated. And he wrote that it was the defeat that ended very much his, legendary life. Palestinians have been fighting colonialism for over 200 years. And every time there is a stage in their struggle. That's why before 1948, you won't hear the word the right of return, for example, simply because Palestinians were not displaced and they were not refugees. They were fighting as a nation on their homeland. But a right of return today is a central issue for Palestinians, and it is the core issue for Palestinian refugees. And often when we speak about Palestine, and especially during these times when the conflict is very visible, whether in Gaza or the West Bank or in Jerusalem, we focus, all of us, on what's happening in Palestine. But over 60% of our people live outside Palestine. And so the struggle of Palestinians in the diaspora and in exile, as Nardine mentioned, it's central to our people. And it's really important to see how the Al-Aqsa flood operation have liberated the Palestinian inner strength outside the new generations that today are getting involved in the struggle. And it's so visible in the US, Canada, Europe, and elsewhere, of a new generation that is actually leading our struggle in the diaspora. So I just wanted to say these few points in order maybe to complete kind of the picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Khaled, for providing that context onto why Palestinians are resisting and what they're resisting against.
No,
if any
you're
of the
not.
panelists can
Thank you.
answer what are the different forms of resistance Palestinians have employed, specifically what is guerrilla warfare and why is it the chosen tactic in asymmetric warfare? Everyone stick up.
And could someone also explain what asymmetric warfare is as well?
Yes. Someone want to go?
I can talk about the different forms of Palestinian resistance,
Yeah.
but not the guerrilla warfare. If someone wants to take over that part.
Okay.
I'll take that part. It'll be good.
Now we're trying to start with it.
Okay, so we can start with Nadine explaining the different forms of Palestinian resistance, and then we'll do Michael, then Charlotte. Okay.
As I said before, Palestinians have resisted settler colonialism and genocide for a century using all sorts of strategies, tactics, and approaches, strikes, marches, demonstrations. But, you know, of course, armed struggle is what immediately comes to mind when you think about the resistance. And this is something that we know that Palestinians have a right to engage in under international law as an occupied and colonized people. And regardless whether this was enshrined in international law or not, we have the right to do so, not granted to us by, you know, bodies like the United Nations, which was the first thing they did was partition Palestine. But even, you know, through their imperialist colonial lens, we still, you know, technically have this right. And this was employed since
United Nations is imperial and colonialist, which means they are the evil capitalist oppressors.
before the inception of the state, so-called Israel during the Nakba against the British Mandate occupation. After the Nakba, you know, with the foundation of the PLO and various groups fighting for the liberation of Palestine, the target of armed struggle was liberation from the Zionist entity and occupation. Historically, armed struggle has been a part of a constellation of resistance efforts which have served as critical to establishing the Palestinian people as a political force. Armed struggle helps shape the PLO into a quasi-state actor within refugee camps in the Arab world, who use the tactic to assert political will in a manner that opens the door for popular education, cultural development, the formation of a collective.
Really? Apparently, Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh are starting to bicker. Either it's a publicity stunt, which it absolutely could be, or Walsh is going to get let go from the Daily Wire. What is Matt Walsh saying?
A collective history of the indigenous Palestinians' relationship with their land and their forced displacement in the Nakba. It also allowed for the PLO to effectively serve as a representative of the Palestinian people. Of course, this is no longer applicable. We're talking about, you know, at the time. And, you know, the international bodies such as the UN still consider the PLO as a sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Although clearly, you know, we refute this given that, you know, Hamas was democratically elected in Gaza, and there was a coup backed by the US, backed by Israel, to get them out of power and to get the PA into power, who are now the unelected leadership, you know, of Palestine. You know, what even got the PLO to this point was the armed resistance that we saw in the first and the first Intifada, which, you know, started, like I said, with demonstrations, with pickets, with boycotts, with strikes.
This is honestly my first inclination about this is like they plan this to make it look like the Daily Wire isn't simping for Israel, to be able to say, look, Matt Walsh is speaking out against these anti-Semitism laws, and while we don't agree, we're not firing him like we fired Candace. I think this is staged. We'll see. Strikes,
and of course, armed struggle was a part of that, and that kind of gave way for us to get a seat at the table when it comes to these, negotiations. But, in 1993, the PLO surrendered the cause of armed struggle for the Oslo so-called peace agreement, effectively selling out Palestine, effectively sidelining every single faction that did not, agree with this to be considered terrorist organizations. This is why, so many groups like the PFLP and others are considered terrorist organizations. It's because they rejected being puppeted by Israel and the US. They rejected this. And then the only group that didn't reject this, they're the group in power. And of course, the Palestinian people resisted this with the Second Intifada, showing that, signing Oslo, and Oslo was...
By the way, I know that this is not the context in which this person is using the term intifada, but for those who didn't see my interview with the revolutionary communists on Saturday, I need to make a clip of this. The revolutionary communists are using the word intifada to mean creating a socialist world, like basically to reference the socialist revolution. And they said this explicitly at the end. So I know that that's not what this person is saying when she says intifada, but that's what the revolutionary socialists mean when they use that word. So the different groups are using them in different ways. And guys, remember, the Palestinian freedom movement in the United States was co-opted by the radical revolutionary socialists. We know that because we have Angela Davis on video saying explicitly that. So for a lot of I'm going to make that clip. It's been on the to-do list for a while, but I do have it. It's at the very end of my interview from Socialism Saturday, where they held up a paper and they said, we are arguing for intifada, which means the socialist revolution. I was like, oh, but that's not the context they're using it in here. It's a little bit different.
Signed the year before I was born. So I don't consent to my rights, my right of return being given away, just like many other Palestinians didn't at the time and still don't today. They continued armed struggle, and up until now, we're seeing armed struggle in Gaza to this day. But even the so-called legitimate forces or the legitimate representatives of Palestine, how did they get there? It was initially through armed struggle. So this has always been, a part of our, how we're able to continue to be here until today. But of course, the only groups that, are going to be called terrorists are the ones who are rejecting, Israeli settler colonialism over our land. So today, this is what the resistance is aiming to do in the long term. As factions have met in Lebanon and announced their intention of forming a new unity government in opposition to the PA or the Palestinian Authority. For those, going all in with the acronyms, let me know if anything doesn't make sense. Who now is a neo-colonial arm of the Zionist occupation. And when, just a side point, as I remember this, when Hillary Clinton's emails leaked, she actually said, "Why didn't we rig the elections?" Because they were upset that Hamas won. They were the democratically elected leadership of Palestine, and in order for Israel to continue its narrative and the U.S. to continue its narrative that they want a two-state solution, the only way that they can continue that is by establishing a coup, getting the Palestinian Authority in power, getting Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas in power. And I believe if you talk to a majority of Palestinians today, they reject him, they reject his leadership.
I don't know that much about the Middle East, if I'm honest about it. It is not something I've spent any time studying, but that's really fascinating. So Iraq had its own Russian Revolution, basically.
There's a reason that Hamas won, and there's a reason that to this day, yes, they're considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. and by Israel, but there are many countries and many people around the world. I think even the UN still does not consider them a terrorist organization.
On the topic of what guerrilla and asymmetric warfare are, it needs to be understood in the fact.
Wait. The LPNH Twitter is getting more unhinged, siding with the cops to shoot. Are you fucking Well, you know why that is? Do you know why that is? Because the LPNH is now completely run by conservatives. So fun fact. I know I haven't talked about the LPNH in a while. There was an election. There was like a state convention, like maybe a couple months ago, and I didn't go. I don't really care to be involved anymore. But basically, everyone running the LPNH right now is a conservative. None of the people who were running it when I was involved are even involved anymore. And so if they're siding with the cops over shooting protesters, it's because the conservatives have taken over the LPNH, because the morons that were running it last year basically disbanded the entire party in the state and just made it all about the Twitter account. So the LPNH effectively in New Hampshire doesn't even exist anymore. Like, it's literally just a Twitter account that is apparently being run by conservatives. Oh, well, I don't co-sign them. I'm not a member anymore.
You're fighting an enemy who's stronger than you, but you have one important weapon on your side, which is the people. An important part of guerrilla warfare is moving through the people like a fish through the sea and attacking the enemy where they're weakest and where they don't know. So an important part about guerrilla attacks is attacking the rear and finding the weakest, most isolated part of the enemy and then attacking them there. If we see with Al-Aqsa flood, the guerrillas attack the weakest parts of
I'm texting Maj Touré right now.
They have around Gaza, and they were able to.
I'm gonna be like, Maj, have you seen that the LPNH is siding with the cops over the protesters? Maj Touré is gonna have a fit.
Through there and spread all throughout different parts of southern 48, and that's just an important part of the essence of what guerrilla warfare is, because it's not attacking the enemy head on, but it's attacking them where they're weakest. Asymmetric warfare, and especially liberation struggles, is important because if you look at it, the IOF has hundreds of thousands of soldiers, hundreds of tanks, hundreds of drones, hundreds of planes, but they don't have the capacity to be able to police. And
Sorry, Michael, can you speak up because people on Zoom can't hear you.
All right.
Sorry.
So the essence of guerrilla warfare is fighting the enemy where they're the weakest and where you're the strongest, and also fighting them at the rear, and then being quick and going at locations where they can't find you. So if you look at it, especially in the West Bank, you see a lot of urban guerrilla attacks when the IOF is at locations where they're weak. When you see operations happening, you'll see members of the brigades will go to, like, when soldiers are at gas stations, when their guard is down, they'll go and launch the attack, and then they'll retreat back into the countryside of the city. That's an important part when you're fighting a liberation struggle where you don't have an army that's the size of the IOF. So the IOF may have tanks, but what you have is, one, you have people determined to fight, and two, you have the masses of people on your side. So when you have those two aspects, it's able to negate the capacity of the enemy because you can fight them through sheer numbers and also confusion. Asymmetric warfare, especially in the case of the Middle East, has proved to be very successful. You see in the Algerian War of Independence, the Algerians were able to mobilize the people in order to engage in guerrilla actions. More recently, you see in Iraq, a big part of American failure was the failure to combat IEDs, which were not, weapons made in factories that are supposedly precision and humane, but they were made out of pressure cookers, dumpsters, garbage, basically, filled with munitions that were able to blow up tanks that were able to, cause serious losses. So that's the reason why the Palestinians adopt these tactics. If you look at it especially as well, in 1982, the PLO in Lebanon had a large kind of conventional organization, but what they failed was being able to fight the IOF head on. But now what we see the Palestinians succeed in is fighting the IOF asymmetrically. Instead of using jets or tanks, they use, paragliders, they use drones, they use all types of weapons that the enemy isn't designed to protect against. And if you see the military victories against Israel that have been the largest, which Al-Aqsa flood was an asymmetric fight. During the Arab-Israeli wars, a lot of the Arab states were fighting IOF head on and they were failing. Even though they had tanks and they had jets. But the Palestinians have small arms, they have IEDs, they have paragliders really, and that's it. They have rockets that they make from having to dive through the wreckage in Gaza, and they're able to, inflict heavy losses.
All right, so are there any more?
Sure. So I will contribute in addition to the great points that Nardine and Michael have already made. One of the points that Nardine mentioned, and I think it's important to emphasize, is that the comprehensive resistance of the Palestinian people has never been an alternative to or an escape from armed struggle, but rather part and parcel of one comprehensive struggle. So like one of the things that sometimes happens in the movement, particularly in North America, is that we are told that, for example, boycotting Israel is an alternative to the Palestinian armed struggle or a more humane way of carrying out the struggle, when in fact these two are two complementary approaches that are, with armed struggle as the primary form of struggle, that are working to achieve the liberation of the Palestinian people. And so these forms of resistance don't come in contradiction with each other, but as part of building a popular mass base of the resistance that is capable of involving all sectors of the population, from children to elders to internationals in solidarity around the world, in a comprehensive resistance project that's rejecting the Zionist entity in all of its forms. And this, I mean, we've heard already about the great history of resistance of the Palestinian people, but that resistance history is leading to the struggle that we see today. I mean, right now, Gaza is the heart of the Palestinian resistance. And it's the beating heart of the Palestinian resistance. And Nardine gave a great history of what's happened since 2006 to make that possible, and the way in which the Palestinian people rejected the coup attempt and were able to build the tunnels to go underground, to develop comprehensive systems of building weapons, not only to use weaponry that was, received from other parts of the axis of resistance, but also to create Palestinian-made weaponry inside Gaza that the Palestinian resistance is currently using to defend the land and the people against genocide. And that's a tremendous achievement, especially given the level of the level of struggle and the situation that Palestinians in Gaza are faced with, given the fact that this is a small area of land. It's very difficult to find like low visibility areas such as mountains and jungles, which are often more successful bases for guerrilla warfare, and that the Palestinian resistance has been able to essentially create through the tunnels a base area from which it's able to lead operations and able to conduct very powerful resistance operations. I mean, if we look at October 7th, we always make the point, and it's an absolutely correct point, that this battle did not start on October 7th, and the genocide did not start on October 7th. And we're talking about 76 years and, in fact, over 100 years of struggle. But the fact is that October 7th changed the world. And that changing of the world is something that was built on the history of the resistance, for example, in Gaza from 1967 to 72, when at that time it was the Palestinian left that was leading the resistance. One of the leaders, one of the commanders, Muhammad al-Aswad, was known as Guevara Gaza, Che Guevara of Gaza. And it was Moshe Dayan who said that we control the strip during the day and he controls it at night. There was a center of the Palestinian resistance in Jordan. There's a center of the Palestinian resistance in Lebanon. And today that center is in Gaza. And despite the genocide, the attacks, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, what we've also seen is that the resistance has only grown stronger.
So I want to make note, because we've basically spent the last half hour in this training listening to them pontificate about the situation in the Middle East. And I know that some of you watching this are going to be listening to them and be like, well, they don't understand what happened, or there are two sides to this story and there's more context. And I'm sure all that is true. The point I want to make is that regardless of if they are telling quote unquote accurate history or not, it doesn't really matter for our purposes, because this is about understanding what they believe, because their actions, what they're going to do in the world, is based on what they believe is true. And it doesn't matter if it's actually true or not. It doesn't matter if there's a bigger picture and a bigger context in regards to like what Israel's actually done that they're not going to acknowledge or any of that. So I know that everyone has strong feelings about this, but I just want to remind people that what they believe is what matters in the context that we care about, because we can predict their behavior based on what they believe, regardless of whether or not that is hinged into reality of what is true.
More resilience and with an even greater level of popular Arab and international depth, and that this is actually on a path towards victory, which is why the resistance has been able to strike such significant blows against the occupier, despite the fact that every imperialist state in the world has seen the advancement of Zionist genocide as central to the program of saving imperialism in the region.
So she just said they view the advancement of Zionist genocide as the way to save imperialism in the region. That means like imposing the oppressive force of capitalism on the land. So in their minds, the Zionists are standing in the way of them liberating the Palestinian people from the oppressive force of capitalism.
Okay, thank you guys for your answers to those questions. And so our next question will be, what are the different armed resistance groups in Palestine? And so we know that they've come together with a shared objective or multiple objectives. So could you guys also repeat on the specific objectives of the resistance? Who would like to answer?
All right, so there are multiple groups both in Palestine and outside.
Can you project the-
Oh yeah, my bad. Sorry about that. So there are multiple groups both inside and outside Palestine. The 5 major groups would probably be Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the PFLP, the DFLP, and Fatah. So Fatah it's a different wing of Fatah. It's not Abu Mazen's faction. It's the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. These groups are all united under the Joint Operations Room with other groups, both in Gaza and the West Bank, and also 48, with the express purpose of fighting the occupation. Hamas is the largest group. They're the democratically elected government of Palestine. They have mass support in Gaza. They have around tens of thousands of fighters in the Al-Qassam brigades. An important thing too is they make their own weapons. The Yasin rockets that they've been using to blow up Zionist tanks were made in Gaza, 100% indigenous made. Even their sniper rifles too that they use have been
They're
made in
making
Gaza.
their own weapons.
Their rockets as well that they've developed to large capacities. So it's a really inspiring thing to see this group that's been under siege by Egypt, Israel.
It's inspiring to see this group develop their own weapons, including missiles and rockets. That's a little ominous.
The United States, basically everyone, Arab reaction, Western imperialism, Zionism, they've been able to create these weapons that have been able to destroy, the most fascist military, one of the most fascist militaries in the world. You have the PIJ as well. They have a very large capacity, and they've been fighting, especially in 2022, they've been fighting the occupation head on. In the West Bank, currently actually in Kerem last night, they were fighting the occupation. They carried out a pretty devastating operation. The PFLP and DFLP, I know especially amongst the Western left, they get a lot of attention, and they've been doing a lot of fighting, and they've been engaged in the Al-Aqsa flood operation, and as well as the
Hey, Josh, since you're so busy owning the libs in my chat, I need you to define what colonization means for me. You can also define colonialism means the same thing. Colonization, colonialism, imperialism. Give me a definition in the chat, please. No one else help him.
Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, especially in the West Bank, have been carrying the flag of Palestinian resistance. They came out of Fatah, but they came out of they rejected the generation of it under Abu Mazen and the late Yasser Arafat. And especially, heroic martyrs like Ibrahim al-Mabusi were part of it, and they've, gained a space in the Palestinian struggle. And you can even see in their recent statement against the capitulation of Abu Mazen and his faction, they stated their allegiance to Hamas, they stated their allegiance to the Joint Operations Room of Palestinian Resistance.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael, for the great overview, really detailed. I have a few things to add that, are just of personal interest.
Okay, this is not the correct answer, Josh. There's more to it than that. Does anyone want to help Josh out with what the definition of colonialization is, or colonization, or imperialism? Nope, not correct.
To me, in the way that these factions have sort of oriented themselves over the past few decades, and the progress that they've made in furthering the struggle and the direction that they've taken. I also wanted to mention the Popular Resistance Committees, which is smaller but also very important.
Part of the movement too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several more smaller groups that are they work with the Joint Operations Room, and so they sort of fall under their same operations, and they don't get as much of attention, but they're just as important in determining strategy and sort of the way that these groups act. I kind of wanted to talk about this shift in militaristic strategy that came since the early 2000s with the introduction of the Joint Operations Room, and the sort of ingenuity that's displayed by the national groups. That was not to not give credit where credit is due, but that was somewhat absent in previous decades. We have Hamas pursuing national liberation in a very peculiar way, which is essentially creating what everyone, I think, considers a united front, but they don't explicitly call it that, using a kind of a blend of tactics and a blend of ideologies that some people relate to Maoism, some people relate to Orthodox Marxist-Leninism, from a party.
Whoa! Hello! Hello. Hello, Mao. Hello, Marx. What was that? Hamas is pursuing national... Yo! Stu, have you clipped this? Let me just mark this for a clip later. Let's watch again.
Have Hamas pursuing national liberation in a very peculiar way, which is essentially creating what everyone, I think, considers a united front, but they don't explicitly call it that, using a kind of a blend of tactics and a blend of ideologies that some people relate to Maoism, some people relate to Orthodox Marxist-Leninism.
So Hamas is, which, by the way, guys, I've never been on the side of Hamas, to be quite clear, for people who like to call me an anti-Semite. I've never been on Hamas's side. The contention of the students at Columbia just prior to the protests is that Hamas is pursuing a strategy of national liberation, incorporating elements of Maoism and Orthodox Marxism. I don't know exactly what they mean by Orthodox Marxism. If anyone has any ideas, let me know in the chat. But that's quite an admonition, isn't it? Let's just listen one more time.
We have Hamas pursuing national liberation in a very peculiar way, which is essentially creating what everyone, I think, considers a united front, but they don't explicitly call it that, using a kind of a blend of tactics and a blend of ideologies that some people relate to Maoism, some people relate to Orthodox Marxist-Leninism, from a party that is not, overtly leftist. It's a purely Islamic nationalist party.
From a party that is not overtly leftist, they are incorporating Maoism and Orthodox Marxist-Leninism. Joseph says that Orthodox Marxism means Marxism without modification. I mean, that makes sense to me, Joseph. Wow. Great find, Stu. Great find.
And I think that that's a really interesting dynamic to observe, because you have these leftist groups that are heralded by especially Western leftists, the DFLP and the PFLP, entering into partnerships and also sharing tactics with the nationalist groups. And I think you can see this in the development of cellular warfare that has showed up and been implemented to great success throughout Alexa Flood. It's sort of a version of guerrilla warfare. It's also a combination of guerrilla warfare with protracted people's war, which is a Maoist technique. And I think I would infer that the DFLP had a significant influence on that tactic choice, where there are individual cells of Al-Qassam brigades that are essentially...
So people are saying in the chat that Orthodox Marxism is the traditional Marxism continued after the death of Marx and Engels. That makes sense. No, Christopher, there is no Gnosticism. That's not real, bro. That's made up James Lindsay lunacy that has literally no basis in reality at all. Please unlearn that, Christopher. I know that the James Lindsay stands in the audience want to grasp onto, like, they'll be like the teeniest little thing that maybe if you look at it and you twist your head and you squint your eyes, then maybe that teeny tiny thing will maybe start to resemble one element of maybe something that could be interpreted as Gnosticism. And then you guys latch onto it and you're like, it is Gnostic. It is a Gnostic sex cult. We were right. James Lindsay was right. Just based on something that you've taken out of context and you've twisted. Please oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. Christopher, I was worried. But Christopher got me. Okay. You win, bro. You win this round. You really did. You threw me. I was like, what the hell? Christopher wins. I lose. I owe Christopher a $2 super chat.
Operating autonomously, but there's enough coordination and enough centralized goals that they can act without being directed. So this allows them to evade or avoid really impacts on strategy due to internet outages. This prevents them from relying on satellite phones or other methods of communication that are visible to the enemy and traceable, able to be intercepted, all of these things. And so you have this development of a resistance body that is essentially impenetrable to the modern technological advances that make modern warfare so successful.
What? I was fighting with a Lindsay fan and was told that Marxists believe capitalism means Judaism. And then they gave me, does James Lindsay, what? Is this why James Lindsay's a Zionist? Well, I mean, does James Lindsay believe that capitalism is synonymous with Judaism? Does anyone know? Oh no, is that actually what he's teaching? Yeah, were those quotes from Hitler maybe? James Lindsay is literally Hitler.
And so you have a situation where one of the most well-equipped militaries in the world, fully funded by the United States.
Oh my God. Okay, we're getting distracted. We're going down the James Lindsay rabbit hole of lunacy. You've seen them saying that Judeo-Christian is synonymous with well, they believe that Western values and capitalism. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. James is definitely a Zionist. 100%. For fuck's sake, James. For those Lindsay fans who might be watching this right now, like in the background secretly, capitalism means private property ownership. It doesn't have to do with being a Christian. It doesn't have to do with being Jewish. It doesn't have to do with any Abrahamic religion. It only has to do with private property ownership. Private property, as specifically defined by Marxist activists, means your ability to own a home, land, a business, a rental property, intellectual property, your parental rights, your individual liberties. That's what capitalism means. You don't need to be a member of an Abrahamic religion in order to access capital. That's just so stupid. Because James, as an atheist, is obsessed with religion. All right. Everyone get your James feelings out of your system. We need to focus. Elena says, I watched a podcast recently of a former Muslim who was diving into the his rationale of radical Islam having Marxist roots. The Word of Momus podcast. That would be interesting. I don't have an opinion on Islam. I really don't. I don't know that much about it. I don't care. Like, I think it's fascinating, but like, I wish I could speak to this. I just don't know that much about it. Yep. James Lindsay is starting his own People's Temple. James Lindsay is a Gnostic atheist. Yep. Oh yeah. James Lindsay, massive Zionist. Anyway, let's focus. No more Lindsay talk. We're focusing. We got like an hour left of this presentation.
United States, and given the most advanced weaponry we have is unable to make a dent in these communication networks because they simply are working as if we're 40 years in the past. And it's really incredible to see. It's inspirational. It's also a development that is showing a new era in the Palestinian struggle. We have unprecedented unity among what used to be kind of called a fringe group of the rejectionist front. Yeah. This is now the core of the united strength of the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian people. People talk about the popular cradle. You know, to have 6, 7 factions utilizing the same popular cradle and utilizing the same consent of the Palestinian people and the surrounding civilians to carry out an operation like this is...
By the way, I just want to make this note for people who might be watching this, just to make sure I add context, because I need to add context for everything I say on the internet. The reason I don't consider myself a Zionist is I literally don't believe that any state has a right to exist. So it has nothing to do with Israel in particular. I don't believe any state, none of them, have a right to exist, okay? I'm an anarchist. I think the government should be completely abolished. So on a purely like just practical basis, I don't think that Israel is special or different than any other state. But like, does it bother me that Israel exists in the context that we're living in? No. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't really care. I think people should be able to do whatever they want. I don't care if people are Jewish. It makes no difference to me at all. I judge people as individuals based on their behavior. I don't believe in judging people as part of a collective identity in any situation, except those in which we're trying to make predictions about what's going to happen in the social system. And then we kind of have to, because it doesn't make sense not to. But to be really clear, that's why I don't consider myself a Zionist. I also think that Israel has way too much influence on the policies of the United States. I am not happy about the fact that we just sent Israel another $30 billion, because I don't believe in foreign aid for anyone. And I especially don't believe in foreign aid for like Israel to fight a war that has nothing to do with us. And I would say the same thing of Ukraine. And I'm literally married to a Ukrainian, and I literally have a brother-in-law in the Ukrainian army right now. So I would say the same thing of them as I would say of Israel. They're no double standards, okay?
Is completely unprecedented. And I think throughout all of the horror that we're witnessing, it's really important to ground ourselves in that as well. This is definitely a new era in the Palestinian resistance.
And an important thing to note too, outside of Palestine, I know we've been talking about Yemen and Lebanon especially, there's Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon. It was founded as like a popular resistance movement in response to the Israeli occupation of Lebanon in following the 1982 war. And it's proved time and time again the myth of Israeli invincibility. They were able to defeat the Israelis out of South Lebanon, which culminated in 2000. They were able to defeat Israel in 2006. And now they're holding up Israel. They have, I think, hundreds of thousands of settlers. I believe it's around 300,000 evacuated the north because of Hezbollah rocket fire. And it goes to show, you know, how the people want resistance. People don't want this peace process. They don't want these like Oslo farces. They want to fight, and they want to fight for the Palestinian people. And going into Yemen too, with Ansar Allah, it's exactly the same. Ansar Allah was founded in the early 2000s, and people call it the Houthi movement, but that was actually pejorative by the pro-US Saleh government. They called it the Houthi movement because they wanted to say it's kind of a cult around the leadership. But in reality, it's a popular resistance movement which is founded out of both marginalization, poverty, with the collapse of South Yemen, and discrimination against Shias, and also a culmination in anti-US sentiment because of the Iraq War. They saw what was happening to their Arab brothers in Iraq, so they said, we don't want this to happen to Yemen. We want, you know, our leader out. And the fact of the matter is they've fought a multi-decade-long insurgency, culminating with their capture of Sana'a. They have the Saudis on the backslide. They have the U.S. not able to defeat them, and they've been able to go up against world capital itself with, you know, blockading Bab al-Mandab, which is one of the busiest trade routes in the world, and they've been able to hold, and they've been able to have people supporting them that whole time. It's just quite inspiring for us when we think about trying to build movements here, you know, fighting imperialism, fighting inequality.
But yeah, Michael just touched upon this a little bit, where there's other armed resistance groups in the region who are often engaged in the Palestinian liberation struggle as part of the struggle to end U.S. imperialism, which is often referred to as the axis of resistance, which Charlotte alluded to. If you can just expand on this, Charlotte. I know Michael just touched upon it, but can we go through what these resistance groups are and which countries they're from, what they're involved in, and what their motives are?
Sure. And thank you to Michael for introducing this part of the discussion, because it is a very necessary and natural connection that we're talking about here. Like when we talk about the ways in which Palestinian resistance groups are organizing themselves and using particular tactics of struggle, the lessons that have been learned from the Lebanese resistance led by Hezbollah have really been central to that kind of development in the past several decades of Palestinian resistance, particularly since the victory and the liberation of the south of Lebanon in May 2000. And so it has been that collaboration with the Lebanese resistance that has been in many ways very central to the development of the strategies and tactics of the Palestinian resistance, as well as building on that historical experience of Palestinian resistance. So when we speak about Palestine, we always say that it's a Palestinian struggle, an Arab struggle, and an international struggle. Now, many of the organizations that are leading the resistance today would also classify that as an Islamic struggle. And we might also classify it as a regional struggle that has relevance.
I didn't catch that, so I need to go back and listen to that. I don't know how far back that was.
Victory and the liberation of the south of Lebanon in May 2000. And so it has been that collaboration with the Lebanese resistance that has been in many ways very central to the development of the strategies and tactics of the Palestinian resistance, as well as building on that historical experience of Palestinian resistance. So when we speak about Palestine, we always say that it's a Palestinian.
Actually, no, I want to go back now. I want to go back now to find that world capital thing. Wait, imperialism. Michael just touched on it. Sorry, guys, I was tweeting. It was my fault. Where does he say that? Hang on. Stu, do you have this transcripted? Dang. It was the guy speaking.
Which is found.
Sorry, guys. My bad. My bad. Okay, that's got to be enough. I bet it's going to be in there somewhere.
And an important thing to note too, outside of Palestine, I know we've been talking about Yemen and Lebanon especially, there's Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon. It was founded as like a popular resistance movement in response to the Israeli occupation of Lebanon in following the 1982 war. And it's proved time and time again the myth of Israeli invincibility. They were able to defeat the Israelis out of South Lebanon, which culminated in 2000. They were able to defeat Israel in 2006. And now they're holding up Israel. They have, I think, hundreds of thousands of settlers. I believe it's around 300,000 evacuated the north because of Hezbollah rocket fire. And it goes to show, you know, how the people want resistance. People don't want this peace process. They don't want these like Oslo farces. They want to fight, and they want to fight for the Palestinian people. And going into Yemen too, with Ansar Allah, it's exactly the same. Ansar Allah was founded in the early 2000s, and people call it the Houthi movement, but that was actually pejorative by the pro-US Saleh government. They called it the Houthi movement because they wanted to say it's kind of a cult around leadership. But in reality, it's a popular resistance movement which is founded out of both marginalization, poverty, with the collapse of South Yemen, and discrimination against Shias, and also a culmination in anti-US sentiment because of the Iraq War. They saw what was happening to their Arab brothers in Iraq, so they said, we don't want this to happen in Yemen. We want, you know, our leader out. And the fact of the matter is, they've fought a multi-decade-long insurgency, culminating with their capture of Sana'a. They have the Saudis on the backslide. They have the U.S. not able to defeat them, and they've been able to go up against world capital itself, with, you know, blockading Bab el-Mandab, which is one of the busiest trade routes.
They've been able to go up against world capital itself. Thank you for pointing that out, Stu. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I missed it the first time.
In the world, and they've been able to hold, and they've been able to have people supporting them that whole time. It's just quite inspiring for us when we think about trying to build movements here, you know, fighting imperialism, fighting inequality.
Yeah, Michael just touched upon this a little bit, where there's other armed resistance groups in the region who are often engaged in the Palestinian liberation struggle as part of the struggle to end U.S. imperialism, which is often referred to as the axis of resistance, which Charlotte alluded to. If you can just expand on this, Charlotte, I know Michael just touched upon it, but can we go through what these resistance groups are and which countries they're from, what they're involved in, and what their motives are?
Sure. And thank you to Michael for introducing this part of the discussion, because it is a very necessary and natural connection that we're talking about here. Like when we talk about the ways in which Palestinian resistance groups are organizing themselves and using particular tactics of struggle, the lessons that have been learned from the Lebanese resistance led by Hezbollah have really been central to that kind of development in the past several decades of Palestinian resistance, particularly since the victory and the liberation of the south of Lebanon in May 2000. And so it has been that collaboration with the Lebanese resistance that has been in many ways very central to the development of the strategies and tactics of the Palestinian resistance, as well as building on that historical experience of Palestinian resistance. So when we speak about Palestine, we always say that it's a Palestinian struggle, an Arab struggle, and an international struggle. Now, many of the organizations that are leading the resistance today would also classify that as an Islamic struggle. And we might also classify it as a regional struggle that has relevance to forces in the region that are not necessarily Arab countries, but are absolutely part of the region, for example, such as Iran, who definitely have an interest in seeing a region that's free of US imperialism and free of US control and domination. And so when we speak about the axis of resistance, we're in many ways talking about all of the forces in the region that have come together and that have developed an alliance to reject US imperialism and reject imperialist domination of the region. So obviously, we're certainly talking about the Lebanese resistance. We're talking about Hezbollah, the commitment that the Lebanese resistance has had throughout this entire time, not only to the liberation of Lebanon from Zionism, but to the liberation of Palestine as well. Right now, the Lebanese resistance is waging a battle on the northern border of Palestine that has caused significant damage, that has emptied settlements in the north of Palestine and emptied military bases in the north of Palestine. That has been a significant contribution to the resistance in this battle, in addition to everything else that we've already discussed. Of course, we were just speaking about Yemen and the Ansar Allah movement, which is also representative of the legitimate government of over 80% of the people of Yemen, and the armed forces of Yemen that are essentially taking it upon themselves, taking up the responsibility, for that matter, under international law, which has been completely abandoned by all of the imperialist powers, to actually stop a genocide that is in the process of taking place. And they've done that by cutting off access to the Red Sea for Zionist ships and for Zionist shipping, and now the United States and Britain, because their immediate response was to begin warfare upon Yemen. So when we speak about the Ansar Allah movement, we speak about Hezbollah, these are forces that are directly involved in this battle that is taking place today. This isn't just a battle taking place in Gaza, and it's not just a battle taking place in Palestine. This is a battle for the entire region. Now, of course, we're also talking about the resistance movements in Iraq. We're also talking about resistance movements and people of Syria. And we're also talking about Iran as a nation on the side of the Palestinian people, intervening and building a movement of resistance to free this entire region, to free Palestine from Zionism, but to free the region from US imperialism. When we say October 7th changed the world, one of the reasons why we might say that is because on October 7th, we saw the potential of a future for Palestine liberated from Zionism by the force of the resistance.
That means capitalism.
And what that also showed was the potential for liberating the region from imperialism. That all of the sanctions, the anti-terror laws, the blockades, the ongoing genocide for over 75 years, the colonization, the attempt to divert the Arab nation into internal warfare and strife rather than conflict with Zionism and imperialism, that all of these things had failed, and that Palestine was once again, as it has always been, the compass of the region towards liberation. Now, when we speak about the axis of resistance, we're usually very specific.
Palestine is the compass of the region towards liberation. What that means, it's kind of like, look at this, Palestine has always been the compass of the region towards liberation. It's kind of how, like, people don't understand why socialists in the United States don't just move to like socialist countries like Venezuela or Cuba or any of those things. Why do they have to implement socialism here? Why don't they just go to a socialist country already? The answer is that socialists believe that if they can turn the United States, if they can elicit a Marxist revolution in the United States, that's like the first domino that will go down, and every other country will fall after the United States. Well, what they're telling us here is Palestine has always been the compass of the region towards liberation. Liberation means removing the oppressive force of capitalism, expelling the evil settler colonists. Colonization means imposing the oppressive force of capitalism on previously indigenous land. Decolonization means taking the land back and returning it to the indigenous people and removing the oppressive force of capitalism. What they seem to be saying is that Palestine in the Middle East is like the same kind of domino, where if they win the revolution against the evil settler colonist capitalist oppressors of Israel in the region, then that is the first domino that will go for all the other countries in the region. Am I just making that up? Please, someone fact check me if I'm just making that up, but that seems to be what she's saying.
Now, when we speak about the axis of resistance, we're usually very specifically speaking about these countries. But it's also one of the reasons why we need to speak about a broader front of resistance. Because when we talk about our global movements for liberation, when we talk about the countries in
the global movement for liberation means we are not free until everyone is free. We are not free until everyone is free of the oppressive force of capitalism. That's what they mean when they say globalization.
Asia and Africa and Latin America that are standing up for Palestine. When we look at what's happening from Venezuela to Cuba to Nicaragua pursuing Germany in the International Court of Justice, to even things like the case that South Africa is bringing, what we're also seeing is an international front of resistance that is being built on multiple levels with these resistance forces at the core of defending humanity. And so the question for us who are organizing, particularly in North America, in the belly of the beast, in the heart of the imperial core, is how do we get organized and use the organizing that we're doing in order to be a meaningful part of that global front of resistance, that we can actually be of service in a moral, political way to the resistance movements that are on the front lines, fighting Zionism, fighting imperialism, and fighting for a future that means a future of liberation for humanity rather than one of continued exploitation, hegemony, and domination.
Liberation for humanity means liberation from the oppressive force of capitalism. When they say exploitation, they believe that capitalism is the ultimate capitalist oppressors. New slime bot. Crystal slime this week.
Yeah, I have one last part on the point expounded on by Comrade Charlotte, or two different quotes. There's one quote by Mao who said, you're not 2 million Palestinians fighting Israel, you're 100 million Arabs, you must think and act according to that basis. And then from Ghassan Kanafani, the PFLP's revolutionary martyr, who said, the Palestinian cause is not just the cause of the Palestinian people, but all oppressed peoples everywhere. It's truly a global fight, and the internationalism that we've seen since October 7th really shows that.
I'd also just like to, add, when we look at the countries that are vilified by the U.S., countries like Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran, we have to understand that there's a reason that they're doing that. There's a reason that Saudi Arabia can kill a journalist in plain view in their embassy, and that doesn't threaten their relationship with the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. wants to inflict regime change in Syria. They want to, push down the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen. And it's because these countries, as Falun folks have mentioned, these are the material and financial lifeline of the Palestinian resistance. They have provided the counterweight to U.S. hegemony in the region, not just on the Palestinian struggle, but rolling back the influence of American and Western influence and domination in the region generally. Without the axis of resistance, we would see a domination of American and Zionist influence in the region in the same way we see its influence in the Gulf, Egypt, and Jordan today. Contrary to what many of the people of those countries want. Their leaders, their governments are bought out, and this is why when we protest the Egyptian embassy, we protest the Gulf countries. It's important to understand that Iran has specifically played a role in supporting the Palestinian resistance on a military level. While the resistance has been able to independently develop its capacity to resist through indigenous means, as Michael mentioned, the indigenous-made rockets. I like that. Like taking munitions from sunken British World War II ships or converting settler plumbing pipes into weapons. So some of the pipes that the settlers left behind in Gaza, they use that, to make weapons to fight for the Palestinian resistance. A lot of the things that Palestinians or the means that Palestinians have to resist come from Iran, and a lot of the ways our people have been able to protect themselves came from the Iranian people, and it's past time to recognize this. It's not for no reason that the U.S. has been undermining Iran for decades, and a lot of that has to do with their assistance to the Palestinian people.
So I will say this, it's not uncommon, and Stu, you're going to see this the more of these that you watch, it's not uncommon for socialists and leftists to be reading a script. In fact, like that's most of the presentations they do at conferences or trainings or any of that. And that's why like the most productive part of any training we watch is almost always the Q&A, because in the presentation part, they're almost always reading off of some pre-prepared script that they've thought about and they've wordsmithed and all that. But once they get to the Q&A, they have to speak extemporaneously, and that's when they say the quiet part out loud. By the way, I'm almost done the Elvis. Well, actually, I'm not. I have a little bit more of the Elvis beer, but the Elvis beer is really good, and it's really alcoholic, just for the record. But I'm enjoying it. All right, guys, please do mount that like button for me if you have not mounted it already. We have about another hour left of this presentation. We are going to get through it all. And, who knows how drunk I will be by the very end. It's going to be fun for you guys, though.
Charlotte talked about Lebanon, and we understand that the IDF is unable to fully deploy the weight of its military machine against Gaza because the Lebanese have proven to be a serious threat that can independently threaten the existence of the Zionist project. There's a lot to be said about Yemen from a geopolitical and logistics framework. The end of Israel from being able to use the Red Sea for trade and military logistics is a serious development that deserves serious attention. The Yemenis were the first people in history to use anti-ship ballistic missiles, and we know that route is now closed to the Zionists. They now threaten to close the Indian Ocean to Zionist traffic as well, but time will tell on that front. The Iraqis are working on closing the Mediterranean route to the Zionists. They have claimed several drone attacks on Haifa port, which is the Zionist biggest port, which would effectively besiege Israel from any maritime route whatsoever. And so the importance of this access can't be overstated. The exact politics of these organizations have been attacked and debated for decades, even from people from within the Palestine movement itself. But fundamentally, the principle of a united front is what we're interested in. We don't enter united fronts agreeing with every partner on every single issue. We enter united fronts to confront the primary contradictions in the region, which in this case is Zionism and U.S. imperialism. And the axis of resistance has proven itself many times over, at least much more than Twitter academics and Westerners who slander their resistance movements in the service of U.S. imperialism. We saw this during the early SJP student movement, where the movement was split in half due to the ongoing Syrian war, which served Zionism and U.S. imperialism ultimately. I'm glad to say that contradiction seems to have kind of resolved itself, but many more have taken in its place. So understand that they will use Syria, they will use Iran, they will use all of these things, to divide us. And then when we talk about the axis of resistance, it's also important to look at the influence of Russia and China and their support to these countries as well. And now, the Zionists are trying to spin it. Oh, Russia and China vetoed a ceasefire resolution. No, it wasn't a ceasefire resolution. And it's important, the fact that they're actually standing with us against us and rejecting, that narrative. So, the demonization of all of these countries is ultimately connected to their support or connection to the axis of resistance and support of Palestine. And we shouldn't be fooled by propaganda meant to undermine that.
Thank you guys so much for that. It seems like from what you guys are saying that a lot of the countries being demonized are ones that cannot be controlled by the US and Israel. All right, so next we got our next question is how have the resistance tactics and demographics changed over time? What role have the diaspora and allied forces historically played? And what role do they play now?
How have the resistance tactics changed over
And I
time?
guess you guys could see if any of you guys could answer these questions first.
Can I give it a stab?
Sorry, I think Amra should get it too.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I'll go first. Anyway, yeah, I want to go back to something that was mentioned earlier as well about certain groups being labeled as FTOs or designated terrorist organizations, and the impact that that has had on the transnational nature of the struggle, the impact that that has had on the connection of the diaspora to people back home in Palestine. And I just want to, like, you know, we're all pretty young. But, like, you know, none of us really lived in a time when these organizations weren't designated terrorist organizations. And I think that that's more important than people give it credit for. 1997, I think, was the year when almost every Palestinian faction that rejected Oslo was designated by the United States. Quickly afterwards, all of the countries in the EU followed suit, etc. And I think it's interesting because, you know, in the 70s and the 60s, you had these, well, 70s and 80s also, you had these transnational bodies that were built up of Palestinians who had been exiled or Palestinians from, you know, the camps who had moved abroad for education, etc., things like that, who had solid connections to the struggle back home through their families, who were connected to the leaderships of these struggles and leaderships of the parties, actually, because there was no international barrier to doing that would put you in prison immediately. So we had groups like GUPS, General Union of Palestinian Students, and also the General Union of Palestinian Women, who maintained really strong transnational connections from the diaspora to the homeland. And in the case of GUPS, GUPS was actually a wing of the PLO officially. And 1997
Good night,
put a wall in front of that process. Now, you know, the movement abroad and the movement in the United States has to worry about being imprisoned for life for affiliation with an FTO if they so much as contact a representative or an individual from any of the legitimate political parties that are inside of Palestine.
Only that five.
Yeah, this is a significant lawfare tactic that has been leveraged against so many individuals, whether with basis or with no basis. In the case of the Holy Land Five, baseless accusations, but this designation and this label that the United States and other countries have been able to use to circumvent what should be human rights law. But of course, I mean, if you make the rules, you can change them whenever you want. So it's transformed the movement in a way that has created a significant break between what we consider the revolutionary period and the modern era, or what we're in right now. And I think that wall is a hurdle that is sort of constantly looming in front of us as we try and fight for Palestinian liberation from here. It also puts a wall in front of, you know, joint struggle partners in all of the various liberation struggles around the world who are also trying to contribute to the struggle for Palestinian liberation, but they also face this intense criminalization in an international level. So I want to, you know, start out with that. I think that's a really significant development.
Yeah, so I want to contribute to this discussion. I know Khaled's going to speak a little bit more maybe about some of the broader Palestinian institutions and the movement of the diaspora, but I do want to kind of hone in a little bit on this discussion of anti-terrorism laws and how that intersects with the Oslo process and NGOization, because this isn't just like, this wasn't a situation where these organizations and institutions were healthy and in good shape when those terrorist designations came out in the 1996-97 period. This was a period in which those institutions had already basically been demolished due to Oslo. And the purpose of the anti-terrorism legislation was essentially to, as you said, Sean, to prevent an alternative from developing, because the organizations that were placed on the FTO list, so if we look at the original executive order, which came out in 1995, this executive order specifically said that it was designating organizations that posed a danger to the Middle East peace process. In other words, to the Oslo process. So the organizations that were listed were essentially those organizations that refused to be part of the Oslo process. So Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad movement, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement, the Popular Front, there's an interesting story about the DFLP and the terrorism list, but maybe that is a little too far afield for this discussion. But the DFLP, all of the organizations that were part of the rejectionist front were and the Lebanese resistance were labeled as foreign terrorist organizations. And initially that was just a financial sanction, and then it became a criminal sanction in 1997. Because what had already happened is that the PLO institutions outside Palestine had been drained of their resources, their membership, their finances, and their ability to organize post-1993. And so this was meant as essentially, it was meant to strike a blow to ensure that there would be no PLO, there would only be the Palestinian Authority, and that what used to be called the PLO, or what is still called the PLO, would be transformed into an entity not for the liberation of Palestine, but for the maintenance of the Oslo process, and that any alternative to the Oslo process would be fundamentally criminalized and attacked. And so this has, as you correctly stated, posed an obstacle, but it's also gone hand in hand with NGOization, because the criminalization didn't come by itself. The Oslo process also came with the creation of hundreds of NGOs. In fact, Palestine has the greatest number of NGOs per capita. Now, there are a number of NGOs that do great work in Palestine. This isn't meant to be an attack on everybody who's part of a human rights institution in Palestine or something like that. But the fact is that NGOs were created as an alternative to revolutionary political parties and revolutionary organizations. And they were created in order to channel the energies of the Palestinian people into a form that would always require a new grant from the European Union, which could be revoked at any time. And what we see if we look at the past 30 years is that initially they were quite lax with their grants. There were no political conditions on who was employed by the organization or institution, and very few conditions on what was said by the institution. But what we saw over the years is that now there is an intense amount of political conditioning that's been adopted by the United States and the European Union. Yes, the two primary enemies of Palestine are also the two primary funders for which the Palestinian Authority and NGOs rely upon. And now they've imposed heavy political conditions. So now not only have they separated these institutions from being popular institutions associated with parties to being NGOs with no connection, they also are now conditioning it so much that you can't even hire employees that have a Palestinian political affiliation. Right? So now if you hire employees that have a Palestinian political affiliation, you can lose your funding, you will no longer exist. And all of this is meant as a way of sanctioning the resistance. So if this entire discussion about UNRWA funding, for example, is literally about the idea that Palestinian institutions, and in this case, international institutions, that if you are a member of a Palestinian political party or resistance organization, you should not be able to work and your family should not be able to work and you must starve. And that's the mandate that's being offered by the United States and its partners. So this also poses the question to us, which is how do we resist that? Because we can't simply say, oh, well, they're an FTO, so then it's illegal. We have to really, it's important for us to come together to do everything that we can to make support for the resistance as mass-based and as popular as possible, because the more that we're able to do that, the less the state.
Well, this is actually a great point, but I will note this. Israel has overtly said on multiple occasions that they are not interested in a two-state solution. So I'm not convinced that it's just Palestine that is being obstinate in this regard. I think Israel is also being provably obstinate in this regard, which I think it's stupid on both parts. But H. Tom makes an interesting point. So that's why they don't want a two-state solution. It would support the capitalist status quo. They won't compromise. They want to totally destroy the system and create a socialist utopia. I'm not entirely positive that I would say that that's true of the actual Palestinians who are actually living there. Because again, we're getting right now the socialist interpretation of this, which may or may not be it may be the reality, it may not be the reality, and I just want to leave room for that. But in regards to like socialists not supporting a two-state solution, I can understand that perspective.
Is able to pursue kind of unjust prosecutions. Material support does have a meaning in that it's meant to be material. Yes, the state wishes to expand the definition of that to comprise everything and anything in the world. However, it does not comprise moral and political support. It does not. There is this attempt in that's never been tested in an actual case to say that, say, doing a campaign, if you're being coordinated by the FTO, could be considered material support. And that the state might want to try to pursue this kind of thing in order to frighten and suppress the movement. But the greater the support for the resistance is, the lesser their ability to pursue such a strategy is, which is why it is important to popularize campaigns to scrap the US terror list entirely, or at the very least, to get Palestinian, Lebanese, Yemeni, Filipino, and other revolutionary organizations off the terror list, because that's a weapon that's being used against the Palestinian people, against the Arab people, and against the solidarity movement as a whole, and in order to kind of fundamentally deform the politics of the movement. There's a lot more to be said about this, and I'd love to continue this discussion later, but I know that there's a lot more stuff to be said about this fundamental question about resurrecting Palestinian political organizing in diaspora, and it would be great to hear more about that.
I'm sorry, I thought there was someone before me. Okay. I just say a few points on this very important issue, and that is any struggle, whether it's Palestinian struggle or any other struggle, it really depends on so many factors, as you all know, particularly the balance of power internationally and regionally, and also the balance of power within the Palestinian National Liberation Movement itself. So, for example, Palestinians were the main backers and funders of the Iranian movement before the revolution of 1979. We were the one who were giving them weapons and money. At the same time, we were also the main backers and funders of the South African struggle and their military wings of the ANC in terms of weapons, money, training. We have opened military camps for our brothers and sisters in the Kurdish movement.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Mary. Mary, thank you. The right makes a huge mistake in thinking these people are stupid. Oh my God, it's like the biggest mistake in the world. They say it all the time. Whether or not they're historically correct, I don't know, but they should be taken very seriously and are far from stupid. I mean, this is why I rag on people whenever they come into my chat and they're like, they're libtards, they're mentally ill, they're stupid, they're crazy. And I'm like, all right, well, they're winning. They're winning massively. It's not even close. If we were in a little league ball game, this would have been called after like the fourth inning, because they're not just 10 runs ahead. They're like 87 runs ahead, and it's only been 4 innings, and that's how bad we're losing. And it's just like, you want to tell me they're stupid, they're mentally ill, they're all these things? Well, what does it say about you that you're losing so badly to stupid, mentally ill people? And it's like, when you underestimate your opponent, you only give your opponent an advantage. So it's very literally the right working against themselves. And now the right has started now blocking anyone that doesn't reinforce their like conspiracy theory opinions. So really, I mean, they're very literally creating this massive echo chamber for themselves where they're just going to be feeding each other this misinformation because it makes them feel good to feed each other this misinformation. And it's like, I feel like I'm watching it as an outsider and going, you really have no idea what's going on. Like, there used to be a time where the right understood the left better than the left understood the right. And I still don't understand. I still do not believe that the left understands the right at all. But the right does also not understand the left. And it's just like, yeah, I think we should absolutely start a stupid jar, Angel. Yep.
I mean, at one point of time in our, in Lebanon, and every national liberation movement, including Black liberation movement in the United States. And so Palestinians were playing a leadership role at that time, in a world where you have a...
Yo, for people who didn't hear the Twitter space last night that I did with Mayor Kate, we had some... We had some very insecure men in that Twitter space, didn't we, Brucey? Like, oh my God, they were so pissed at me. They're like, you're a bitch and you're boring. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm a bitch, but you don't need to be here. You can just leave. And I was getting so hangry towards the end of it too, because I hadn't eaten like all day. And so it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like really, really hungry. And I was like being yelled at by these stupid, inferior men who, by the way, weren't even from America. Like, the stupidest people on that Twitter space weren't even Americans. And at some point I even said to the guy, I was like, are you even from here? Where do you live? He had this thick accent. He's like, it's none of your business where I'm from. I'm like, yeah, it is my business. We're talking about America, bro. We're not talking about Indonesia or Malaysia or India or wherever the hell else you're from. We are talking about America. So it is explicitly relevant where you're from. What the fuck? Anyway.
Socialist camp led by the Soviet Union and another camp led by the United States. And if we take, for example, certain tactics that the Palestinian movement have practiced, take, for example, hijacking airplanes. It was one of the most...
It should be still up. It's on Mayor Kate's page, and I tweeted it out as well. And I want to make some... I actually had some really good rants in that Twitter space, so I want to make some clips of it. Yeah, oh God, the Indian guy. There was a leftist in that Twitter space that was like, he literally came into the Twitter space and he was like, we should all try to understand the socialist and form these single issue alliances. And he literally said, he was like, we should try to be in solidarity with them. And I was like, bro, I will not be in solidarity with leftists ever. Then he said, you are in a cult and you're brainwashed. I'm like, no, I'm actually realistic. And he said, well, I want to protect the Constitution. He's not even from America, by the way. I want to protect the Constitution. I want to work with the left on protecting the Constitution. I was like, do me a favor. Go to Colombia and tell them that you want to protect the Constitution, and you see how that works out for you. Because the far left radical revolutionary socialists don't want the Constitution to exist. So good luck. Good luck working in solidarity with the socialists to protect the Constitution when the socialists literally want to abolish it. Idiot. I swear to God. Okay, Reagan put the link in the chat. Thank you, Reagan.
Important tactics that the Palestinian resistance have engaged in, and not one single person was...
And I just want to say, for embracing the entropy over on Twitter, now you understand why I have my filtering mechanism, don't you? Because I get a lot of people like that coming into audiences with me. Now, like, I had to be kind of a dick to embracing the entropy on Twitter because he was saying stupid things and I needed to test him to make sure he wasn't going to come and say retarded things in my chat. And to his credit, he actually stood up to it and he was like, I'm going to come back anyway. And I was like, okay, I love it. I love nothing more than when I yell at people and they come back after I yell at them. So points for him. But like, now you understand why I have the filtering mechanism that I do, don't you?
Injured or killed in all of these operations. Yet when you see Hollywood movies, you think that, Palestinians have killed thousands of people in these operations. Not one single person was injured, because the goals behind these tactics was actually to address the Palestinian people cause, pain, why they struggle, and these questions that you are asking today in this panel. What Palestinians are fighting for, what is their objectives. These were means for Palestinians to explain to the world their struggle. And if it wasn't for these tactics, we would never heard of Layla Khalid, for example. and other Palestinian women who led these kind of heroic operations that introduced the Palestinian questions to the world. If you take, for example, the speeches that were giving to the people in the airplanes by Palestinian fighters, and these documents, when you read them, they're all about what is our struggle is about. And it's also important to, I think, see that the Palestinian diaspora, especially after the establishment of the PLO, all Palestinian social sectors, whether students, as it was mentioned, there were GOPs, or the women organizations, workers, teachers, doctors, and so on and so forth, they were engaged in the struggle as what we call bases of the revolution. Today, Palestinians don't use the word revolution, they use more the word resistance. But I think after October 7th, Palestinians have revived their revolution because they have now engaged in not just defending themselves and their existence, but also we are moving towards taking initiatives, tactical defensive kind of approach. And also we saw that these tactics that the resistance adopted, especially since May 2021 during Saif al-Quds battle. I also want to say that, you know, the balance of power within the Palestinian National Liberation Movement was always in favor of the right-wing trend of the movement, which is led by Fatah. And the reason of that is because Arab regimes wanted to support a nationalist trend that wanted to just focus on the Palestinian question, and their relationship to the Arab region and to the international struggle wasn't exactly, based on an anti-imperialist understanding and an anti-colonialist understanding. For Yasser Arafat, for example, he had his own ideas, but we cannot see that school of thought. We saw where it led us. It led us to Oslo. That's why it's very important for Palestinians, when they are rebuilding their revolution and their institutions in the diaspora, to always be aware that the leadership of the resistance, the leadership of the movement has to come from the popular classes, the working classes, the impoverished classes, because these are very, very important issues that will secure the line of the revolution and the line of the resistance. That's all. Thank you.
So this is our last question for the panel discussion. I know we talked a little bit about the diaspora's role in resistance tactics, but as organizers and students in the belly of the beast, what strategies and tactics should we take up in acts of solidarity for the Palestinian resistance? And sorry, if we can keep this a little more brief, just because we have Q&A questions in the Slido. So yeah, if anyone wants to start.
Just to really emphasize one of the last points that Khaled brought up, just as Palestinian society in Palestine has been NGOized, our movement is facing the same, crisis here. So, not all organizations are the same. Not everyone is a 501c3 certified.
So it kind of sounds like to me, and we're going to let her finish, but it already kind of sounds like to me that the protesters at Columbia were actually kind of afraid of the influence of money. So for all those conservatives who are running around saying, Soros funded, Soros funded, Soros funded, we're hearing directly from the people who are organizing the protests at Columbia that they're actually not on board with that type of funding. But let's let her finish. I could be wrong.
Organization, there is a difference between grassroots organizations that are, organizing, that are trying to organize the diaspora here, that are trying to organize Palestinians in exile, to revitalize their revolutionary spirit in pursuit of a free homeland, and organizations that are getting, funded by sometimes the same organizations that fund literally Zionist organizations, like the
They don't want Soros money because it would corrupt their movement. This is the same thing as the Revolutionary Communists of America. The international organization that is over the Revolutionary Communists of America, and that's like coordinating among all the international countries. They literally said in their charter, and this was like back in like 1992, that they are not going to take money from any organized groups because it would corrupt their political movement. This is why they are entirely self-funded.
New Israel Fund, and I won't name names here, but a lot of the organizations that, are so-called part and parcel of the Palestine movement are literally funded by the New Israel Fund, who I think funds J Street also, I think, and a lot of other, Zionist things like.
My God. Literally, as we're watching the section of the protests of the presentation, where the actual organizers of the protest are actually talking about how they don't want that type of money influencing what they're doing. Because, guys, you can't be a radical and be influenced by someone's money. It just doesn't work. Literally, Alex Jones is tweeting the George Soros conspiracy theory. Conservatives had descended into the land. There's not even any point in trying to reason with conservatives anymore, because they are so far down the land of retardia rabbit hole that I don't think there's any way to save them. You cannot reason with these people. You really can't. I tried to earlier. It's like they just post a headline. They don't actually even read the thing that they're posting. They don't think about it. They have no idea what groups are involved in any of this stuff at all. They're literally telling us they don't want to be influenced by this type of money. This was weeks before the protests actually kicked. The protests have been going on for months, but the encampment, this was weeks before this. And they're telling us they don't want that type of money. But do conservatives listen to the left? No. Whatever. They're going to lose. And it's going to be their own fault when they lose. And I don't even feel bad for them anymore.
Yeah. And so it's put us in a position where we don't want to do public infighting in front of Zionists. But, our interests are different. There are people who could be benefiting, off of this moment by getting increased grants and things like that to their organizations. And then there are people who are being banned in Germany, like Samadoun, who are being banned off of Instagram, like within our lifetime, who are facing way more police repression for a reason. The police have.
Within Our Lifetime is actually one of the groups behind the protest. That's actually one of the groups that are talking right now. No one in conservative media is even mentioning Within Our Lifetime. They have no idea what it is because they never bothered to look into it.
Straight up told us there's 3 times the amount of police at our protests than other Palestine protests. And why can't we be like the other guys and get permits and fall in line? So there's going to be a lot of this LARPing.
That's hilarious. Definitely not a conservative.
Live action, role playing. Everyone's acting like a revolutionary, and they'll use the sloganeering, and they'll dress the same, and they'll use a lot of the chants that we make, but it doesn't lead to the same thing. So don't just blindly support and follow, and that doesn't mean that you need to go attack these organizations or call them out. But, understand that, especially as students, when you have access to places like these, to resources like this, to the legitimization that comes with speaking out of university, that you don't fall into uplifting the orgs or the people who will like wholesale sell us out, whose goal will to be to replace us. And that's not about like censoring us or anything like that, but understanding that the revolution will not be funded. NGOs will not bring the path of resistance. They're good, they're needed, they could be helpful as a supplement to the actual revolutionaries leading the work, and they shouldn't be leading it. They shouldn't be the ones.
They could be good, they could be helpful in terms of supplementing the actual revolutionaries, but they shouldn't be leading it. Conservatives, do you hear this? Because they're literally telling you they are not Soros funded, and that they don't want to be Soros funded, that being Soros funded would corrupt their movement, that even if they did take some money indirectly from them, it would just be to supplement what they're doing, and that doesn't mean that it would have any impact at all on what their decision making is.
Putting themselves on the forefront as leading it. The NGOization of Palestinian society is one of the biggest impediments to why we're not free today, because we are united in resistance. And what would they do to revolutionaries? They killed them. Now they just buy them out, and they come cheap. At least here in the U.S.
They're literally talking about revolutionaries being bought out with money and not wanting to be that. Oh my God.
So keep that in mind, and don't don't acquiesce to the idea, well, they're considered terrorist organizations, so we shouldn't talk about resistance. There have been organizations since October 7th, and I'm not going to name names, but kind of putting themselves out on the front line, literally telling me, we want to invite you to speak, but you can't mention October 7th, you can't mention resistance. Straight up. Actually, now they mention resistance. Now they'll talk about it 3 months later or 5 months later, because they saw we did it, we got away with it, we got support for it, and we're kind of like the test subjects or the guinea pigs. We're going to put ourselves out on the line, and if people are okay with it, then they'll jump on it later. So always try to support those that are the most advanced, and don't be afraid, don't be backed into a corner. We thought, look at post 9/11, you never thought you would see Muslims and Arabs and our allies, having protests screaming in the streets like Allahu Akbar, which we do now. And now
I really do want this to be a lesson for everyone who bought into this conservative narrative. Listen, guys, I know we don't like the left, okay? We are not on the left's team at all. We think the left are crazy. However, when the conservative right is making stuff up and doing half-assed, shitty journalism, which is exactly what it is. I've read the stories about George Soros is funding this. All of them are shit journalism. None of them actually understand the groups that are behind the protest. And by the way, I've been tracking some of these groups for months. Before all this shit started, I was tracking them. We were talking about them on Socialism Saturday. We were talking about them on my Monday through Friday live streams. I knew who a lot of these groups were. Conservative media still has no idea who's actually organizing the protests at Columbia. They have no idea. And what they're doing is they're finding some loose connection between a national organization, which, by the way, the coalition at Columbia that organized the protest is a coalition of 100 different groups. They're finding some loose connection between one national organization of one of those groups, and then they're writing these articles saying these are entirely Soros funded when there's no evidence of that. There is literally no direct evidence. And again, I've read several of these articles today. None of the articles, when you actually read them and go beyond the headlines, have any evidence at all that the Soros money actually made its way to the protesters. It was all funding different things. I'm not saying there was no money involved, but it had nothing to do with this. And they're telling you, the literal people telling you, these are the people running the goddamn protests. The radical revolutionary socialists in their private meeting, they didn't know that Stu Studio was recording this. They actually explicitly said at the beginning of the meeting, no recording. And the only reason we have this recording right now is because Stu Studio didn't listen to them and he recorded it anyway. This is them speaking in their private space. And they are saying they are self-funded and they hate organizations like George Soros because they don't want to be corrupted. The Soros funding is a myth. It is not real. I just don't even, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. This is like when they saw those piles of graduation chairs and they were like, they're pallets of bricks, which there were a lot of conservatives on Twitter saying. And when I tried to say, no, those are graduation chairs, they would literally block me and say, those don't look like graduation chairs. They look like, they were graduation chairs. This is like saying, well, why do they all have the same color tent? Oh, I don't know, because they all coordinated with each other and someone put a link in a group chat to an Amazon tent that was like $20 and said, hey, everyone buy this tent. And then they all clicked on the link and bought the tent. Or alternatively, someone pulled out daddy's credit card and bought like 10 of the tents themselves on one credit card and they just bought all the same tent. Or alternatively, they all went to the same store at the same time and bought out all the tents at the store. But no, this has to be some massive worldwide conspiracy theory to fund a bunch of $20 tents. It's like if conservatives actually ever care about winning anything, they need to start hinging themselves back into reality because all of the receipts were out there already. All of the receipts are there. And instead of spending any time tracking down people talking about this stuff on the internet, which they're obviously and clearly doing, conservatives are just making up conspiracy theories that have no basis in reality. People like James Lindsay are spreading lies. People like Alex Jones are spreading lies. Everyone in conservative media is spreading this lie. Want to know why? Because this is one of their favorite ways to make money. If they scream about George Soros, they make money. It doesn't matter if they're true or not. The tent on Amazon now says low stock because they've sold a lot of them. Gee, I wonder why. I wonder why a random tent on Amazon is now saying low stock. I wonder whose father's credit card got that bill. This isn't even hard to figure out. As long as you just listen to them. Do better, conservatives. Do better. Because these people are kicking your ass and you're going to lose if you don't hinge yourself back into reality.
Even the NGO allied organizations who told us we shouldn't have religious chants or we shouldn't say things in Arabic or we shouldn't chant about resistance are now forced to adopt those same exact things because they are taken up by the masses and they are so popular. The masses are actually so far in advance of what so many of these NGOs do. And every time people thank me, I tell them, don't thank me because you know what I'm saying is what your mom and dad have been telling you in your house since you were little kids. And they can agree to that. So be brave, be courageous. And, you know, don't, I'm not going to say don't get yourself in trouble because we're all getting in trouble all the time here. But, you know, understand that all of these stigmas that they put against us, these are social things and they can be fought back against too. And the masses are on our side and we outnumber them.
All right.
Tough to follow. I just want to say I heavily back everything that Nadine has just said. I also want to bring up another element to this, which is what the, let's say, intermediate advanced sectors of the above ground movement are capable of doing and where the gaps have been in such a critical moment, right? And, you know, I'm here speaking on behalf of National SJP. For 2 decades. Right?
National SJP is the National Students for Justice in Palestine.
Right. SJPs have been pursuing divestment, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It's BDS. New York City SJP actually released a scathing article on the BDS ceiling, which was the idea that BDS is the only, it's the end point of the movement here, right? It's as far as we can go. After that, pack it up. The article was correct, right? That it's not the ceiling. There's so much more to be doing. BDS is a way to control a movement that has so much potential. And
hang on, we got a super chat from Rottweiler. Rottweiler said, didn't we see Haymarket Books being involved already? Socialists fund other socialists too. It's simple. It isn't as sexy as, well, yeah, Haymarket Books is involved in all this stuff. Haymarket Books has been preaching about this stuff for a while. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they were somehow, I mean, this is it. Socialists are an insular ecosystem. They all fund all the other groups. They're insular. All the money is just binging around to all the different groups.
So much power behind it, but is redirected into the acceptable channels. It's really respectability politics. But on the other hand, it's been 19 years since the BNC was formed and BDS was launched as a Palestinian campaign. We have not divested, we have not boycotted, and we have not sanctioned. And I think that this is important for us to remember that, of course, there is no BDS ceiling. There is so much more work to be done. And yet also, we haven't accomplished what's on the floor. And I think it's really important that we all ground ourselves in the possibilities that are in front of us, the power that we've built.
Well, I mean, DI is saying, I was a scholarship kid in the 80s, and even I had access to an emergency credit card with $500 of money in it then. Oh, yeah, I did too, which would probably have bought 20 of those tents today. A couple kids probably bought in bulk. It's like, I see these conservatives going, don't these kids have to go to class? It's like, I know you guys didn't go to college. I really understand, because most of your time in college is not actually spent in class, and it's not actually even spent studying either. It's not. It's spent doing like social things. It's spent eating. It's spent hanging out. It's spent, like going to parties with your friends. I'm not saying you don't go to class and you don't study, but to say that all of your time in college is spent going to class and studying is just stupid. What does this mean, Stu? Mackenzie Scott donated $1 million to CUNY Clear, which is like CUNY's own chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. Can you tell me more?
Over the past several decades, the power that the diaspora has, the communities that have been strengthened, despite all of the setbacks that they've encountered, 9/11, the war on terror, the repression that the Muslim community in this country has endured, right? But we have this power, and it's time to use it. So yeah, BDS ceiling doesn't exist. However, BDS is a good step one. And I think all of these SJPs that are currently trying to push divestment and push through these demands on campus, totally above ground, totally within the bounds of the institutions that we all know are corrupt. It's step one. And
I mean, I'm not suggesting the billionaire money doesn't exist. I'm not suggesting that at all. My suggestion is that it's not going directly to funding the protests like everyone thinks it is. That's all I'm saying.
I think, I want to salute Columbia SJP and
listen, if there were actual receipts to George Soros directly funding the actual protests, I would be screaming it from the rooftops. I really would be. I'm not opposed to actual evidence leading to that conclusion. What I'm opposed to is reaching that conclusion based off evidence that is not grounded in reality at all.
A lot who are taking on this work at Columbia, and acknowledge that y'all are hosting us here today for this conference. This panel. But I want to say that it's step one, and I think that people are again finally coming around to this conclusion that yes, step one needs to happen. There's more work to be done, and as you said, the advanced elements of this movement are propelling us forward. And it's unfortunate that sometimes some folks are 10 years ahead of the rest of the movement, but now we're catching up. So, yeah. They
can go first.
Charlotte, Khaled, do you guys have anything to add?
Thank you, speaker.
Oh, Charlotte, Khaled, do you guys have anything to add?
I wanted to say a couple of points. some of them are actually kind of personal when it comes to the student movement and the boycott movement. You know, I spent my youth years in New York, and I worked very much near Columbia University, but I was a worker and I was never part of the student movement. However, we always felt as workers, youth, that we are part of the student movement, although we weren't students, because there were always this bridge between student work and community work. I have attended so many lectures by, organized by the Arab Student Club in Columbia University, where I saw Edward Said speaking and, fight with him when I was 16 years old. And so, and debate with Edward Said. And so I think it's really important for us to build these bridges between the student movement and other struggles as well, within the campus and outside our campus border. Our enemies would love to see students only in campus and not be engaged, in building alliances with the workers and with unions and other. The other thing I wanted to say is that sometimes I feel that there is two sets of discussions and priorities. One in Palestine, like when I speak to my friends and brothers in Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the PFLP in Gaza these days, especially after October 7th, we talk about different things that has nothing to do with our movement outside almost, because people in Gaza now, they don't care about what Biden says and what Kamala Harris says, and they can care less about, some of these things that is happening in the media, all these useless debates sometimes that happens in the media. What they're focused on is to actually stop the Israeli aggression and defeat Israel. And so when they see students organizing outside Palestine, they really feel that they are being backed as a resistance and they're being supported. Every demonstration in New York matters for Gaza way more than, all these nonsense debates that happen in mainstream media. So your work is so important to the resistance in Gaza more than ever. And on the boycott, I believe that there should be a boycott movement, but it should not be limited to, BDS. I don't see people in Palestine talking about BDS, not even outside, since October 7th. No one is talking about this because, as it was mentioned, it's a tactic and it cannot be replacing the liberation movement, cannot replace the student movement. It's just one item on the agenda that Palestinians and their allies.
If anyone wants to send a super chat to Tim Pool tonight and let them know that Karlin Borisenko has direct evidence on her channel that George Soros did not fund the Columbia protests, I'm not saying I wouldn't be mad at it. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying if you want to.
Allies can use as to support their struggle, just like sometimes when we mention international law, in this context, not because we feel that international law could liberate Palestine for the past 75 years.
If you send a super chat to that regard, take a screenshot of it immediately and send it to me, because Tim's people have a bad habit of deleting super chats that my people send. I don't know why. We're just literally telling the truth. But no, Tim absolutely will not read it. But that doesn't mean other people won't see it, Rottweiler, and the other people seeing it has value.
That didn't happen. And, the UN would issue countless numbers of resolutions that supports the Palestinian people.
And they do.
In fact, the International Day of Solidarity with Palestine was in May 15th. It was not in November 29th. People would gather around the world saying that May 15th, on May 15th, on the Nakba Day, that we stand with the Palestinian people, struggle for their liberation and for their rights. And these things change. You know, Zionism used to be, there's a resolution by the United Nations that Zionism is a form of racism. And then that was changed after, you know, the balance of power changed. And so in 1989 and 1990, you know, Israel started waging campaigns to remove that article that considers Zionism a form of racism. And they give it to Israel as a reward to attend the Madrid conference, you know, in 1991. So we know that we cannot only depend on these tactics as a strategy for liberation. I just wanted to say these few points. That I feel that it's important not to look at what is in our hands now and be kind of prisoners of the moment, but to be strategic and to be patient as well. You know, Iranians, our brothers and sisters in Iran have something called the strategic patient, you know, and we should also, you know, read about how to actually be patient and not look on like solutions, what we need now, and accept what they are offering for us just because we are under pressure. I think also, you know, it's really important what's happening, because although Israel is committing genocide and war crimes against our people in Gaza, we do feel that there are other ideas that it's coming of how to fight back internationally, and you know, boycott and other issues as well. Thank you.
It's okay. We just want to move on just so we can get to the questions from the audience. So one of the questions is pertaining to the Asymmetric people. Can you share about what you meant in your piece? Gaza is not just a location; it is a strategy.
Yo,
So the essence of
Naruto just DM'd me a video from the Revolutionary Communists of America titled "How to Escape the Gaza Solidarity Encampments." Well, that's interesting. I'm not going to look at that right now, Naruto, but I promise I will before tomorrow.
the argument was that what happened in Gaza isn't just what they do to Gaza, but they do it globally. An important part about that fact was you could see it across the world, especially here in the U.S. border. You're seeing the kind of creation between Latin America and the U.S. as us versus them. There's always been there, but now you're seeing it ramp up even more. The militarization of the border, the rhetoric for war against Latin American countries has grown exponentially in just the recent decade. And that's just part of like this kind of regime of, as kind of the crisis of imperialism deepens, you're seeing the contradictions grow between the global south and the third world and the first and second world. And the first and second world are going to these more, you know, chauvinistic, or going to these more openly terroristic methods of blockade, of kind of concentration, of ghettoization. And we've seen this also historically too. Like they did it in Malaysia to try and stop the communist rebellion there. They did it in Vietnam to try and stop the communist rebellion there too. And now you're seeing it in Gaza. In Gaza, they're using it to perfect it across the globe.
Would anyone else like to answer? Maybe people on Zoom?
Sure, I'll contribute to the discussion. This was a Samadun NYNJ statement. Happy to put a link in the chat for people who'd like to read this statement. But fundamentally, what this statement is about is just like what Michael said, which was the idea that there is a war being waged upon the working class of the world, which largely is the global south. And there's also a resistance that's taking place. And that resistance is being led by the Palestinian resistance, the Yemeni resistance, the Lebanese resistance, all of the resistance forces in the region who are fighting back for a different future for humanity. And that one of the ways in which we're seeing that implemented on even a smaller scale, because there's different levels of this repression and attack everywhere, is through these mechanisms mechanisms of repression. So that ranges from the NYPD beating up people in the streets of New York for having a protest for Palestine, this also to the NYPD engaging in its regular practices of intimidation, killing, and assaults against Black communities, against racialized communities, against oppressed communities in New York and elsewhere, that goes to the U.S.'s southern border, that certainly goes to this level of surveillance that we're seeing these reports that Columbia is surveilling students' use of Wi-Fi to keep an eye on what's happening in terms of protest organizing, that this is essentially using the tactics that are being used in occupied Palestine as a testing ground, essentially, for new mechanisms of warfare and repression around the world, which has always been part of the imperial collaboration with the Zionist project and the imperialist sponsorship of the Zionist project. Like, one of the things that we're seeing in Germany happening right now is that comrades who are being repressed for their organizing in the Palestine movement are seeing threats against their families. So, for example, the mothers and sisters of activists who are organizing for Palestine are receiving notices from the government that their refugee status is going to be stripped, and they're going to be deported from the country. This is a form of collective punishment of targeting families, and it's something that we see every day taking place in Palestine when the occupation forces invade a home and will seize someone's mother and sisters in an attempt.
Hang on, this has nothing to do with the video. I just want to say, I don't believe that Adam was actually a backstabber in that situation. I'm actually, Adam actually legitimately did backstab me. Adam backstabbed me by using me to make that like over $1,000 one night by serving me up to the most toxic possible audience on the internet and then hiding my ability to see the chat when he was doing it. And so Adam Krigler actually did backstab me, and he can permanently eat a dick for that move. But what I will say is that I am an intellectually honest person, and I don't actually think that Adam backstabbed him. I think Tim fucked over Adam. So in the Tim and Adam debate, I am legitimately on Adam's side, even though Adam is a garbage human being that served me up to a white identitarian audience for over 3 hours in order to make money.
To coerce them into giving themselves up or into revealing some kind of information. This is a form of psychological torture being weighed against the Palestinian population. And so we're seeing that both inside and outside Palestine, and not just extending to Palestinians, but to all of the peoples of the world who are confronting imperialism and who must confront imperialism in order to see a better future for humanity.
No, there was a reason. There was a very legitimate reason. We don't have to talk about that.
This question was answered a little bit by Nadine, but one of the questions that was submitted was, what do you think are the biggest gaps in the international solidarity movement right now, specifically in North America? If anyone wants to say. Okay.
I think a big part of it is popular participation. A lot of the time, Palestine organizing can feel like, as Heather was pointing out, isolated on the campus, and that's something they want. But something we really need to do is to go amongst oppressed peoples, go amongst workers, and actually, build towards popular organization. Because one of the most important parts of the lifeline to the Zionist entity is the economic factor, the shipments to them, not just of weapons but of food. And if we could have, say, unions boycotting that, people going on strikes, militantly opposing that, we could really see a dent. And it's also, the implicit thing is, someone who sees their neighborhood policed because they're poor and working class, and knows what it's like to get beaten just for being someone who's poor, can also sympathize with someone in the West Bank who knows what it's like to get their neighborhood policed, getting beaten by the IOF. So the fact of the matter is, the link is there, and we just need to unite it.
Anyone else like to answer this? Maybe Charlotte, Khaled, or the other speakers?
Maybe I'll just add that, I think like just going back to divestment and stuff like that, just to clarify for when Sean's saying not one school is divested. Yeah,
that's not true.
No, I mean, it is true because they divest on paper, right? Like they passed a divestment resolution, CUNY Law, BDS, CUNY Law, which I graduated from, we divested, but not actually. We just the students basically recommended that we should divest. We voted on it. The board is not going to divest. Not one single board of any school has ever actually divested or pulled funds from Israel or cut off relationships or cut off funding. What we did is just to create a problem for the school where if they invite an Israeli scholar, which they did after we passed divestment, that it would be like a shit show for them, that people would have something to hold them accountable to. That now we have this piece of paper that says all of the students agree on this and you're violating that. So, that's the purpose of it. It's to politicize your campus environment. So, I think that
the purpose is to politicize your campus environment. They're flat out saying it. Like, the purpose is like, okay, we have made it clear that we don't want you dedicating money to doing anything in relation to anything Israel related. If you're going to invite some sort of Israeli scholar here, we're going to make it a shit show. I actually kind of respect that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that everyone should be allowed to speak. And if you just don't want to hear someone speak, you just don't go. But obviously, I respect the tactics. I use the tactics all the time.
That's good. It's a good way to introduce Palestine to people who may have never, heard about it before. But, at the times that we are at now, it's really dangerous to let BDS or any of these city council resolutions that people are trying to pass, you can't think of those alone as wins. I see people screaming and shouting and hollering when, their city council or their whatever, their school passed whatever. You're not really symbolically it's good, but when you treat that as a win, as the ultimate win, and then everybody packs up and goes home, you're derailing the movement. So understand that these are little things that we can do to help advance our cause, but don't get stuck there and don't present it as the most important, thing in the universe that needs to be done right now, which I see a lot of student movements and a lot of students doing, and people get excited and that's fine. But, this is why we started Within Our Lifetime. Within Our Lifetime initially was NYCSJP, which was a combination of student organizations in New York City at the time that did not want to be isolated to the campus. We understand Palestinians didn't need to come to four-wall auditorium, panel discussions about why Palestine should be free. They already knew that. We needed to use our resources and knowledge and skills to empower them to be able to say that effectively and, through protests and through, community organizing. So I really do want to emphasize, different speakers talked about this in different modes, community organizing and linking, what Khaled said, linking the student movement to outside of that. And don't be discouraged, right? At the time, Columbia actually did not want to be a part of NYCSJP. I know you guys weren't there. They're like, we have so many tests. Columbia is so hard. It's an Ivy League. You guys go to CUNYs. You guys may have time. Columbia, we're so smart. We can't do outside work. And look where we are right now. I was on National SJP and I was actually kicked out for being too radical. And now I'm sitting in Columbia University next to a representative from NSJP.
She was in the National Students for Justice in Palestine and was kicked out for being too radical. I think Stu mentioned this in the chat earlier. That's crazy, yo.
Because people will understand these things. So
Stu, have you looked into her at all? Do you know anything more about her? There are definitely a couple of protesters at Columbia that I want to keep tabs on, that weird kind of guy that we saw interviewed where he's that weird charismatic cult leader guy that looks exactly like a guy I slept with in college. We need to keep tabs on that kid. That kid's going to be a problem. This person, if she's too radical for the students in justice in Palestine, she's going to be a problem.
Push as far as you can, even when you feel like everyone's against you. This is what it means to be a Palestinian, what it means to fight for the Palestinian struggle. They want us to feel like we're alone and that we're isolated. But in actuality, the world has our back. The world supports us. We need to be brave to really make that visible.
So one thing I wanted to just kind of add in this discussion, I agree with everything that everybody already said, but it's about the conversation that we're having today, which is about resistance. And it's awesome that we're having this conversation today. And it's great, like what we're seeing, for example, in demonstrations. I mean, when we go and speak at a demonstration, right, like we get the loudest cheers when we talk about Yemen, Lebanon, and the resistance around the region, and when we speak about the Palestinian armed resistance. Like that, we notice this time and time again, right? And this is happening in various places across North America. I mean, it's not like Vancouver is unique in that regard.
Yeah. James Lindsay loves Stu right now. Stu, don't tell James Lindsay that you and I are like on speaking terms, because James Lindsay won't repost you anymore. We need James Lindsay reposting you and elevating your content. Just, we can keep this all between you and I. He doesn't need to know about it.
But one of the things that I think is really important, right, is that, and it is a
James Lindsay doesn't need to know that I found Stu Studios content months before James Lindsay did. James Lindsay doesn't need to know that this isn't even the first Stu Studio thing that we've watched on my channel. We have watched at least 3 Stu Studio things on my channel, because he's doing such good work, and I found it randomly in a YouTube search, and I'm really glad I did. But James Lindsay doesn't need to know that, okay? We want him to keep reposting Stu's content, but just understand that I found Stu months ago, okay? I'm just saying.
To a certain extent, is that a lot of times these conversations about the resistance, we are afraid because of all of the reasons that have been created by the state specifically to make us afraid, to put that in the forefront, because we're worried that it's going to alienate people, and we're worried that it's going to be like not as mass as using another slogan. But that's not really what we're seeing, right, in practice. So if that's not the experience that we're actually having, then we shouldn't assume what our enemy wants us to assume is true about the people. And we shouldn't assume that people are put off by resistance. We can actually take a look at Western society and say that this is in fact not a society that is appalled by violence. This is a society that, this is not a society that is appalled by violence. And of course, too much of what we see is reactionary violence and violence of the oppressor, and white supremacist violence, and the violence of capitalist exploitation, and the violence of imperialist occupations and wars and invasions. But it's also certainly true that this is a society that is full of people and full of narratives and histories of revolutionary resistance and resilience, and stories of victory and struggle. And so it is incumbent on us.
Nick Fuentes just announced that Jared Taylor is going to AFPAC, and now I'm like, motherfucker, I really don't want to be associated with Jared Taylor. God damn it, Nick. God damn it.
Us that when we do go out and speak at demonstrations, and we do go out and organize, to say that we stand with the Palestinian armed resistance, and that we support them, and that this is a struggle that we want to be part of, and that this is not illegal. This is not material support. This is purely moral and political support. So, and I'm saying that to be, very clear on the legal side as well. This is moral and political support, which we have every right to have, and we have every right to engage in, and we have a responsibility to do it, right? Because the resistance are those who are on the front lines, defending Palestine and really defending all of us. I mean, what happened on October 7th was that all the imperialist forces started flocking to Tel Aviv at the same time that settlers were looking for plane tickets to get out of occupied Palestine, because they saw the future of the downfall of imperialism and were determined to do anything to stop it. And so the action that the Palestinian resistance undertook on the 7th of October was an earth-shattering undertaking. They actually took the necessary action, and they took an action that they understood is necessary in order to make change. And so the very least that we can do here is to not equivocate about who the forces are that are fighting this battle, and to speak a very, yes, it's absolutely absurd, the number of things that Zionists claim are Hamas. Yes, it's absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But the fact is that Hamas is a mass Palestinian movement that is in a leadership role in the liberation struggle right now. And there is nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
As a reminder, I do not support Hamas. I might have issues with Israel. That does not mean I support Hamas, who this person is saying is a mass leader in the struggle for liberation. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Liberation means to liberate oneself from capitalism. No, no, no. October 7th was not a necessary action. I do not support what Hamas did on October 7th. I want to be really fucking crystal clear. Yeah, I'll go back and replay it. I want to be clear. We can watch this again. Yeah, I just yeah. No, no, no. This socialists, this is how we know the socialist revolution is going to turn violent at some point. And again, I don't think the violence is going to happen until the very end, but we know they're going to turn violent at some point because they believe that the violence is a necessary action. Stu says, remember this was an event at Columbia and was going to be a part of Barnard College too? Yep. This event occurred in the LGBTQ dorm. Holy shit, Stu. Holy shit. Okay, let's go back. Let's listen to this whole thing again.
Be, very clear on the legal side as well. This is moral and political support, which we have every right to have, and we have every right to engage in. And we have a responsibility to do it, right? Because the resistance are those who are on the front lines, defending Palestine and really defending all of us. I mean, what happened on October 7th was that all the imperialist forces started flocking to Tel Aviv at the same time that settlers were looking for plane tickets to get out of occupied Palestine because they saw the future of the downfall of imperialism and were determined to do anything to stop it. And so the action that the Palestinian resistance undertook on the 7th of October was an earth-shattering undertaking. They actually took the necessary action, and they took an action that they understood is necessary in order to make change. And so
they undertook an action they thought was necessary. Okay, I don't think their action was necessary, but keep going.
Very least that we can do here is to not equivocate about who the forces are that are fighting this battle. And to speak a very, yes, it's absolutely absurd, the number of things that Zionists claim are Hamas. Yes, it's absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But the fact is that Hamas is a mass Palestinian movement that is in a leadership role in the liberation struggle right now. And there is nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas, being a leader of Hamas, being a fighter in Hamas. These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
Yo. Again, liberation means for these people, maybe not necessarily for Hamas, but again, I feel like I need to state this over and over. I am not in favor of what Hamas did on October 7th. That was terrorism, mother effers. You don't do that shit. Not cool. Not necessary. Not acceptable. I don't care how many issues I have with Israel and the government of Israel or any of that. Not fucking cool. However, we need to keep in mind that when she says liberation, she means liberate from capitalism. That is her context. That might not be the same as Hamas, but that is her context. And what this means for us, and I know that everyone is disgusted by what we've just heard. And Stu, I now understand why you have in your description that what they said here is abhorrent. I totally get it now. What we need to keep in mind is that they believe that violence is a necessary action, which means that at some point in the United States, when these people feel emboldened enough, and I think, again, we're going to get there within the next 10 to 15 years, I really, really do. They are going, and that's not to say there's not going to be violence before the next 10 or 15 years. I just think the real violence is going to come at the very end of the Marxist revolution. They see no problem with using violence to overthrow the system that they want destroyed. That's what I want people hearing from this. I understand that we're all outraged at hearing that what happened on October 7th was a necessary action, which is despicable and abhorrent and wrong. Disavow. But we need to be concerned about how that's going to apply to us. Because we can't go back. We can only go forward, okay? Descendant of Loki, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, we have about less than 10 minutes left of this presentation. I really want to commend everyone that's made it all the way through it. I know this was an extra long presentation tonight. Please make sure you mount that like button for me if you haven't already. As a reminder, I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow on Saturdays, we go at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for Socialism Saturday. And as a reminder, movie night in the supporter Discord is starting at 6 p.m. It's not starting at 8 p.m. It's starting at 6 p.m. Okay, so we're doing early this week because we're doing a Hunger Games double feature. Let's wrap up.
And so that's the kind of, I don't want to
you.
reduce the struggle from the materials.
No, we also got some gifts from Descendant of Loki. We got Sour Kiwi. We got songs that are catchy. We got Sam. We got Fender Bean. We got Alexis. Thank you for the gifted memberships. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, once again, guys, let's do one final round of applause for Stu Studio. He's doing great work. Please make sure you're following Stu on YouTube. Please make sure you're following him on Instagram, or not Instagram, Twitter. There we go. I'm sorry, I've had a lot of beer. Twitter, YouTube, follow Stu Studio. He's the best. He's doing amazing work. He is doing absolutely amazing, impeccable coverage of what is going on in the college protests. I really, really value him. He's one of the good ones. And so let's all make sure we're supporting Stu, because without Stu, we would not have this presentation today.
To the verbal or to the moral, but it is actually necessary for us to do this if we're going to build an international popular cradle of the resistance to be alongside that which is Palestinian and that which is Arab and that which is regional. And just to say, in addition, the work that's being done to directly confront arms factories, like by Palestine Action in Britain and some of the Palestine Action stuff that's been moved here, that's come here. There's now 4 folks in New Hampshire that are facing major charges and a trial coming soon because they're working to actually bring that direct confrontation of Zionist arms factories, that direct role of resistance here. We got to stand with those who face charges, who get arrested, who get labeled as terrorists. We have absolutely got to stand together. One of the most dangerous things in this movement are forces on the right wing and liberal forces who, instead of confronting our enemy, want to tell us to turn on each other and label each other too radical and too dangerous and blame each other for causing the problems rather than our enemies. So we got to stand together and fight with those who are on the front lines and fight with those who are on the small front lines here and refuse to be turned against each other and instead go harder toward the resistance and go sharper toward the left, because this is our chance. The resistance is on the front lines paving the way for all of us. So we've got to take up our responsibility to move forward.
One last thing, and it's important to realize this thing.
Sorry, Khalid, did you have anything to add?
I just wanted to say that the reason that Palestinians are living under siege, and not just in Gaza, if you look at any Palestinian community today, whether in Jordan, in Syria, in Europe, there is some form of siege that Palestinians are, living under. And it's important when it comes to here in North America, Turtle Island, to see that other struggles that October 7th have opened or provided a forum for other struggles, the indigenous native people struggle, Black liberation struggle, worker struggle. These are really important to not just to talk about it, but to actually have a deeper look at how interlink and direct link to the Palestinian people struggle, and not just because we want to build alliance. I think we also need a dialogue, and it has to be a two-way dialogue. Palestinian resistance, we should not romanticize it in the way that, oh, everything comes from, Palestine is pure, and everything Palestinian resistance say is correct, and, as if it's a one hegemonic unit. We can learn so much from other people's struggle, and it will affect our resistance to become better, not just in terms of fighting, Israel, but also understanding, the struggle in its international, dimensions, and how important it is. Because often we see that some of the Palestinian leaders, even in the resistance, they go and put so much effort, for example, on building a relationship with a member of Congress or a member of parliament, or
Good night,
thinking
Rottweiler.
that these people can actually make the difference. And they don't put the same efforts on popular movements. We don't put the same efforts on the basis of the struggle. And so we can learn so much. And I think that the more we look at Palestine as a cause for revolutionaries across the world, the more Israel, fears us, fears the Palestinian resistance, and not the other way around. Everyone is looking at the knowledge. So much knowledge has been, spread out because of October 7th, but, before October 7th, especially amongst younger generation. But Israel fears that. Israel fears this change that it's happening in the United States, in Canada, and in Europe, while we see it as a very important development, not just towards Palestine, but also what kind of societies we want to build here. And so for me, I think like the priorities for Palestinians is to build their resistance and their movement, but really what's happening in the United States and Canada, I feel like it is the most important thing that could actually have strategic effects on our struggle, not just in Palestine, but in the region. The reason the liberation of Palestine is so hard is not because Palestinians are not fighting, it's because the liberation of Palestine will mean changing the entire region and the entire world. Just imagine us crazy Palestinians owning 400 nuclear warheads. What we will do with it.
I don't want that.
Palestine would become a very dangerous place.
Warheads.
And so, and
idea.
yes, that Arab world needs to be liberated. The Islamic world needs to be liberated. And that's why they're scared from Palestinians, because Israel is too important for them. And Israel is precious colony for this West. And now the minute they see students in the United States, workers, our brothers and sisters in the Black liberation movement linking their struggle to the Palestinian people struggle, that's what makes Israel really, really scared and fears, people's role, people participation in this struggle. Thank you.
So we didn't get to go through all the questions just because I know that a lot of people here are probably fasting and have to break their fast. But just wanted to extend a huge thank you to all of our panelists, our speakers. Thank you guys so much. And I apologize to Charlotte and Khalid if you guys couldn't hear very well, and everyone else on Zoom. But thank you so much for this amazing discussion. And I know that we'll hopefully continue this discussion on the resistance and make sure to continue to uplift the resistance in every action that we do here on campus and outside of campus.
Well, they are certainly uplifting the resistance in the actions that they're doing on campus right now. So again, guys, we just watched a full presentation from the actual groups that are leading the protests on Columbia University's campus. Those are the groups that have sparked off the nationwide protests. I will be continuing to do active coverage of the nationwide protests on college campuses. I will be putting as much stuff out there as I can in terms of primary source evidence so that we can know what's really going on. Don't listen to conservative media. Don't listen to leftist media. Even if you don't like me, you don't have to consume my content either, but there is so much primary source evidence out there right now, guys. Go watch primary source evidence. And if you don't like me, then Stu Studio is an excellent resource. I'm honestly kind of shocked that Stu doesn't have more than 7,400 followers on Twitter right now, because he's just been putting out some really great content. He's putting out primary source evidence from all over the country all the time. I've just been, like, again, so impressed with what he's been doing. So definitely follow him. There are some other places that are putting out primary source evidence as well. Remember, guys, you don't need anyone to tell you what to think. You just need to find the people who are putting out the video evidence and then watch the video evidence and then think for yourself about what you believe, because the commentary on both sides of this issue right now is insane. So think for yourself, guys. I will be back at 6 p.m. tomorrow for Socialism Saturday. In the meantime, please make sure you head over to my Substack, carlin.substack.com. You can find the link in the description below, and you can get my email updates. And if you want to support the work I'm doing, yeah, Lawyer Gone Rogue is also doing a great job. I agree with this. I don't agree with Lawyer Gone Rogue on some things, but that's okay, because they are putting out, like, Lawyer Gone Rogue is doing the IG lives that are coming out of the encampments, and so that's really valuable too. So I definitely agree with that. Campus reform, Stu says. Awesome. Guys, I will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. for Socialism Saturday. I hope you all have a great rest of your night. Cheers. We'll see you soon. Bye.